News.
Independent Left News.
Indie Left News.
Independent Left News.
Oh yeah, and I get news from Independent Left.
Thank you, Independent Left News.
They actually put up posts of different shows, different things going on.
Check out Indie Left. They're doing a lot of good things. They're on Twitter and Instagram, and they've helped promote our show a lot.
Thanks for the work you do behind the scenes too. This man does our Discord and some other help, so I just love to shout him out. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah. They kind of really do a great job of pushing.
Thank you, Independent Left, for reminding me of that.
Check out IndependentLeft.news.
IndieLeft.news.
Indie Left, shout out.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome. It is a special Saturday night INN Indie Left interview, special correspondence interview. I am so honored and so welcome to have some of these folks here. I decided, we need to tell this story. It hasn't been told, and it's been told a few times on our channel, on some other channels, but we just wanted to amplify it some more, get it on some different platforms that may not have already had access to it already, and have more people here. The more people that hear this, the more people that share this, the more people that learn about this and get angry about this and raise awareness and start to share it with others. That's only going to help make things happen. Plus, we've got somebody who needs some mutual aid and some support, and we can talk about that as well. So I wanted to welcome in our guests, and that's Noli D, and that is Mike Nelson from Blind Justice. And of course, I've got you guys, your nameplates backwards, so now I need to fix that. What happened? You guys got reversed on me somehow. Did somebody turn themselves off? See that? That's okay.
I have on the floor.
So say hi, everybody. Say hi, Mike, and say hi, Noli.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, welcome again to my well, I would call it Friends of Indie Left, but this isn't really Friends of Indie Left. This is just Indie Left talks to his friends, so and help share stories. Normally we talk to content creators on Friends of Indie Left, but this is somebody who's actually going through a persecution, a story that everybody really needs to hear about. So I'm going to open up the floor, and I'm going to let Noli talk about Mike and talk about his story, it's heartbreaking for me to hear. Anything you want to say, Noli, please do so, and then we can get into talking about how we can help and what's going on with the story, with the case now, and what we're hoping for and what the expectations are. But let's get going.
All right. Well, Mike is an amazing human being, period. He's a great dad. He's a great husband, from what I can see anyway. He should be. He is. But he's a war veteran. He experienced some trauma and got a traumatic brain injury that made him go blind. And he uses assistive devices to get around, to navigate, to remember stuff. This is something that he uses every single day, no matter where he's at, who he's with. It's normal. But for the general public and for places like the health department or the police department or a courthouse, they don't appreciate him coming in with his cameras or with any of his assistive devices. It gets them pretty fucking hot. And he moved 2-3 years ago now, I think, back east, and continued to explore the city independently, just like he did here in Washington. And instead of getting into a bit of an argument with people and then him pointing out the law and whatnot, and them going, okay, you're right, these people have persecuted him. They have abused him. They have thrown him in prison over over a failure to identify when he was a passenger in a vehicle. He was knocked unconscious by the police and left out on the curb somewhere for hours, many hours. And he ended up going to the hospital, and he ended up with another brain bleed. They threw him in a maximum security prison for 10 days over this kind of just this bullshit. There's judges, cops, city managers, mayors, governors, the entire fucking Congress. Who else? Oh, the FBI. What is the other one? The
State
other,
Bureau of Investigation, SBI.
yes. He's gone through all these. He's climbed the ladder all the way to the top to get help because these people are breaking the law. I mean, right on camera, breaking the damn law from the bench and from their police badges and from their, you know, their nice office at the DA's office. You know, it's ridiculous. And I think the best way to do it is to turn it over to Mike and let him explain to everybody what he's experienced and what he is currently going through.
Yeah, please.
Where do you want me to start?
I'd say let's start with well, the case series that you just went through on your channel, or that I guess you're still going through. Let's discuss that case in particular.
Okay, so that's the Guilford County one. That's the one you mentioned where they is in the health department, and this was February 4th, 2020 was the date where I visited the health department in High Point, North Carolina, which is in Guilford County, North Carolina. It's my third visit to that health department, and I had visited a handful of other county buildings within a few months. So we had, like Noli said, we had moved from Washington, and in 2019 we kind of gave everything away or sold things, and then traveled around. We went to Canada for a little bit, went to Mexico for like 7 months, and then the kids and everybody wanted to live near family in North Carolina, so we went there for a bit. And in the end of 2019, we landed there. We were trying to find a place to live, trying to find if we get access to foreclosure lists. We found out they were only kept in person, in paper, in the courthouses. And so my first video that we published, I think, was from December 18th, 2019, kept in person, trying to get access to a paper in the courthouses, getting stopped at the door by the security guard saying, no video, no electronics period are allowed, is what they told me. Was from December, and I said, well, these are assistive devices. They help me with navigation. They help me with by note taking. I have brain damage. I can't remember things long term, and they allow me to be a witness, like visually, to anything that may occur. So they denied that. They didn't know anything about Americans with Disabilities Act. I asked for their disability coordinator. They didn't know what that was or if they had one. They had me out in the breezeway or outside like a dog. They got a clerk to come down, and she said, "Oh, I can't bring out the records to you. You have to figure out a way to get in through going through these red tape and jump through hoops." So we tried doing that. We tried following out who is their disability coordinator, and they didn't really know. We had to contact and email and call people up at the state level before we could figure out who's who. But we found out quickly that they didn't have any training or expertise in the ADA. They're just a title that they were given as disability coordinator, which is very common if you ever look into any disability rights and go to whether it be private company or in the government sector. Most people that have a title of disability coordinator, disability access coordinator, have little to no training, and their primary job is to not give access to people with disabilities, but to cover the company or the entity for liability. Like that's been our experience with probably 95% of any business that we've tried to get access with. So we discovered, as I went to different buildings in the county, in Guilford County, finding out about what services they had and what their accessibility levels were, they were non-compliant with the ADA in many different ways. So I began documenting that, and was still intend to turn over my findings to the Federal Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, and they can take that investigation and follow through with federal actions under the Federal False Claims Act. Specific section is called the Qui Tam provision. That's basically means that anybody can do an investigation, and they hand over their investigation to the DOJ. If they want to pursue it, they say yes, it has merit, they can assign a special prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute the county, because county every year, just like every city that receives federal funding, their city manager or county manager or commissioners sign a piece of paper to the federal government saying that they are in compliance with all federal law in order to receive federal funding. And so if they're not following the ADA or Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which are federal laws, then they have been lying to the federal government to receive federal dollars, and that's
Of course.
fraud. That's defrauding the federal government. And so that's big money that Uncle Sam can come in and take away from these municipalities. So I was conducting that investigation, gone to a handful of different county buildings. I'd been to that health department 2 other times before February 4th, 2020. One was on January 13th. That was following a visit to the DSS office downtown High Point. And when I went there, there was a security guard associated with the county that tried telling me I couldn't record in the public lobby. And then the administrator, Leslie Barbie, she said, "Oh, well, you just need to figure out what services are here. Yeah, here's a service counter. You can ask them your questions." So I did that. They told me what the services were. I followed up a few more questions for Leslie and the security guard, and then I left. So initially there was a roadblock, red flag with the security guard saying, "Hey, you can't use your devices." And then the administrator made an accommodation. It's like, "You know what? We're just going to go ahead and do this. Go ahead." She made the modification that they're required to do and solved the problem. So it started off as a fail, turned into a pass. Like, okay, but they recovered. Right. The second time I went there was a few weeks later, on January 31st, 2020, and trying to figure out if they had mental health services, because the VA mental health services were shutting down. And they gave me directions to a mental health clinic, like on that complex area, like not, with walking distance, the same kind of associated buildings. So I went outside, security guard gave me further directions. I tried to follow it the best of my ability. I thought I went to the right place. Turns out it was a private business that offers mental health services. And they said they weren't affiliated with the county. So a few days after that, I went back to the health department on the 4th of February. And that's where things went sideways. So on the second visit, it was pleasant. Nobody told me to stop recording. Nobody tried to interfere with me using my devices at all. Like, they gave me the information and I left. So it looked like they had made an improvement since the first one, because the first one they tried at first to tell me not to, and then they made the accommodation. So it seemed like the accommodation was standing the second time. On the third visit on February 4th, 2020, that all reversed. Like, as soon as I got to the service desk, somebody approached me and tried to tell me I could be there, I could answer questions, I had to leave. This guy wouldn't tell me who he was. So that triggers, my defense mechanism, and I activated YouTube Live, because I wasn't live on that. I had no reason to be live there. Like, I was following up on a story that I was recording statically. But once I have somebody, a few feet from me in my space, breathing down my neck and not telling me who he is and trying to tell me to do things, then I went live and shared this rest of it live to YouTube. And I answered my questions. Eventually he backed off a little bit. I was able to ask questions about the health services, find out that they didn't actually have any with the county. And then I asked for some prophylactics. They gave me a bag. I went to go stow that in my backpack. And the guy followed me and hovered over me, was mocking my disability. He accused me of trying to force the ladies to answer questions and just all kind of just silliness. And he never told me who he was. He said he worked there, but he never said that he was a security guard. He never said what his name was. Eventually he reaches over and grabs my phone that's in my hand and turns it away from him. And then he claimed that there was a light, like the phone was emitting a light at him that was hurting his eyes. I wear a body camera, and the body camera doesn't show that at all. There was no light. My phone doesn't just randomly emit lights. So I was like, I definitely need your name now. Like, this is a simple assault. Like, just some of the other stuff would fall under simple assault in North Carolina, where you're threatening somebody, you're not, and he has no authority that he invokes to be able to do anything he was doing, right? So threats and the ability to enact those threats is a simple assault. And then when you make contact like that, that definitely falls into the same category. So it's like, just let me get your name, and then I could follow up with proper complaints, and I'm out of here. He didn't want to identify himself. I asked for staff to help. Staff wasn't trying to help, so I asked for an administrator. The same administrator came down. It was Leslie Barbie. I asked her to identify the guy. She wouldn't. She immediately was trying to tell me to turn off my devices. And then a couple more security guard come in and didn't identify themselves. They just surrounded me. And then one of them spoke to me. He identified himself after speaking to me, after I asked him to. He said his name was Dougherty, Captain Dougherty with Cook County Security. And he was repeating, you need to turn off your devices. I told him, hey, these are assistive devices. Let's get your disability coordinator. She said she has one, but they're not in the building, and she's not going to get them. So then it became, turn off your devices, or we're going to ask you to leave. And I was like, well, that's an if-then statement. Like, if you turn them off, then you can stay, right? Or if you don't turn them off, you have to leave. So let's address the if part, because you cannot legally tell me to stop using my devices. These are covered devices, assistive devices under the ADA. It's just like telling somebody with a hearing aid, like, that's hearing impaired,
Right.
take out your hearing aid, or we're going to have to tell you to leave, or get out of your wheelchair, or we're going to tell you to leave. Like, you can't do that. And they weren't willing to have that conversation. They were willing to hear that what they were doing is illegal. And they were concerned. She said that I was violating HIPAA. And I was like, well, that doesn't apply to the public. HIPAA applies, to you guys. And so that they quickly went to shit when the guy that was, flanking me and didn't say anything finally interjects, and he's like, he asks Dougherty, he's like, hey, tell him to leave. So he's trying to solicit a trespass. He's trying to get him to directly to tell me to leave. And Dougherty just repeated, well, if you don't turn off your devices, then we're going to ask you to leave. So he never did actually tell me to leave. Leslie never once told me to leave. At any of the times I was there, the two visits before, nobody told me to leave. And even on the fourth, nobody told me to leave. It was always an ultimatum. Well, this officer that he turned out to be an officer, or at least he's claiming that's still suspect.
Wow.
So he was a security guard. He's like, hey, are you going to leave or not? If you're not going to leave, you're going to be arrested for second-degree trespass. And I go, yeah, I'm absolutely going to leave. But what do you mean by second-degree trespass? My understanding, it's this. And I gave what I understood second-degree trespass to be, if you're on the property of another, and without authorization, and you're told to leave, and you remain, then you could be found guilty of second-degree trespass. And he said his answer is, it is whatever you want it to be. Like, okay, well, there's no conversation there. Like, clearly you don't know the law. And you're a security guard, for all I know, because the administrator said that these are all my security.
And that's on tape, right, Mike?
This is an officer. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I remember watching the video of that. I was like, I can't believe he's saying this on tape, knowing that he's on tape. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm sorry. Continue. I just wanted to point that out. That you have all this stuff recorded on tape, and it's on YouTube for anybody to watch right now.
Yeah, and then the Blind Justice channel doesn't even have the most views on this encounter. It's been viewed millions of times on other channels. So like this, it's gone around the world, and it's crazy because this guy, he didn't identify himself. He never said he was a police officer. He didn't say his name. And when he asked me if I was going to leave, I said absolutely yes. I want a clarification. He's like, well, you're going to have 5 seconds, and then you're going to be arrested. And he didn't even give 5 seconds. It was less than 3 seconds, I think, before he grabbed me and tried to put a handcuff on me. And so I back away from him, but I also turn my chest towards him so that the body cam will try to capture whoever the attacker is. I'm like, hey, stop, don't touch me. This is a stop. This is assault. Who are you? I ask him about 9 times who he is. And he slams me to the ground. The other security guard, Dougherty, takes my white cane out of my hand. And the main attacker, his name is Alfonso Boyce, and he worked for North State Security Group, which is also a company police agency. So they have mercenary cops in North Carolina, where different private security guard companies send people to law enforcement academies, and then they have those guys that they can hire out at a higher pay to be security guards. So they have people supposedly with arrest powers. Now, we haven't confirmed any of this yet because the prosecution hasn't done its job. But So they brutally attack me, and he doesn't identify himself. I would say he never identified himself. Eventually, after I'm on the ground, he tells me his name and that he's with a company police, with North State Company Police, like that. and I would argue that that's still not identifying. And for this reason, if Indy or Noli, if either of you are out in public somewhere, if you're at a coffee shop or something, and somebody in plain clothes comes up to you and says, "Hey, you can't be drinking your coffee here. You need to go," and they're not wearing any kind of uniform, like there's no uniform affiliating them with the business, and they're not wearing any kind of name, badge, or identifying anything. They're just wearing regular plain clothes. Like, what's your response if some Yahoo says, "Hey, you need to stop drinking coffee here. You need to go"?
Like, really? Like, yeah, really? It's, why? I'm not going to do that. What are you talking about? Right, exactly.
Right.
I'm sure the exact same
Right,
way
there's
that
a
you
conversation.
reacted.
Yeah, there's a conversation. What do you mean? What's going on? Like, who are you?
Right.
Like, and then he says, "Oh," if the person says, "Well, I'm a cop," are you going to believe the person that just says, "Oh, I'm a cop, and my name is John
Not
Smith"?
necessarily. No, exactly. Can I see a badge? Like,
Right.
let's have a conversation. Right.
Yeah, can I see some credentials? Is usually the next response. Can I see some credentials that you are a cop? And then you go from there. Like, okay, what authority do you have to tell me to leave? What am I doing wrong in this establishment that gives you the authority to kick me out? Right. But how do you show credentials to somebody who's visually impaired?
I mean, I would think, like, I'm carrying a badge. You can feel my badge. I'll get the person next to me if there's somebody standing there. Again, it's assuming somebody is. I would also hope that they've trained officers on how to, on how to show themselves to, and reveal who they are, other than voice to somebody who's disabled. What happens if it's somebody who's deaf? What happens if it's somebody who's blind, for example?
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, this is a problem that I haven't heard a good answer from any law enforcement agency or a law enforcement officer.
Have they ever been trained on this? I'm just wondering.
I don't know. Because the badge idea, like, while in theory that seems like it may be in the right direction, and application and reality, like, I've never felt a badge from North State Company Police. I don't know if this is what North State Company Police badge feels like, or if this is what a badge that you can buy on Amazon feels like.
Absolutely. No, it's hard to know. I mean, the thing is they would have to, on the spot, like, have a plan to do that in advance and have that thing on them all the time, which some people would, right? If you were trying to perpetrate fraud and do what you're talking about, for sure. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
wow.
Yeah. So, but there's so many ways you could do that, right? We can say, okay, well, somebody could say, let me put my phone on speaker. Let me call, tell my phone to call North State Company Police. Let me have my phone call the sheriff's office that's literally right next door, and see if they can bring somebody over and can confirm what's going on, right? There's so many ways that you can work that out, but there was no attempt to work that out, right? He didn't identify himself, I would say, ever. And before he even offered his name or who he worked for, he had already attacked me, slammed me to the ground. And through that process, he choked me a few times. He eventually got me into a wheelchair and then took me to the magistrate's office. Somewhere along that route, I lost consciousness and then woke up some 4 or 5 hours later in the emergency room. And like Noli said, we found through public record and through the grapevine from hearing from the ER nurses, that from the EMTs, that they found me outside unconscious, and the release document had me released from the magistrate's office around 7 p.m. or shortly after 7 p.m. and the EMTs found me sometime after 8. So that's the story. Now they charged me. He charged me with second-degree trespass and resisting a public officer. So 2 different misdemeanor charges. Neither of them are violent misdemeanors, and that went to district court trial in September of 2021. So it took them a year and a half to have it go to trial, and then it was pretty much like a rubber stamped guilty verdict. The prosecution didn't present any evidence, and this is all on the channel. Anybody can review it. They didn't present any evidence that would, any substantial evidence to prove the elements of each crime that they're required to. For trespass, for second-degree trespass in North Carolina, if it's public property, and even quasi-public property, so this is something that people don't really know much about, the difference between public and private property or quasi-public property. Private property is like your residence. It's anywhere where the public can't just walk in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where somebody can't just walk down the road and then go and open the door and walk in. If it's any establishment like that, whether it be your house or anything that you know that you just can't walk in and open the door and go in, it's private property. If it's anywhere that you can walk in off the street and open the door and go in, then it's quasi-public property. Unless it's actually government, then it's public property. So Walmart, Taco Bell, any business that has its doors open to the public for doing business is quasi-public property. At least the entryway and whatever is in the public lobby or foyer, wherever they do business with the public, right? That aspect is called quasi-public property. And you can't even be kicked out or trespassed out of that. You can't be trespassed out of Walmart in North Carolina unless you are causing disturbance, unless you're creating disturbance to the business. That's the minimum threshold, is creating disturbance. And if committing a crime, of course, is beyond that, and causing a disturbance to a business may be a crime in whatever certain circumstances. But the minimum threshold to be trespassed under second-degree trespass in North Carolina is causing a disturbance to the business. That same is true in public property. So if it's at the police department, at the post office, at the health department lobby, the minimum threshold to be trespassed is you have to be causing a disturbance. Breaking a policy is not causing a disturbance. If they have a policy against using recording devices, which they're claiming there is, that in and of itself does not constitute a disturbance. So that's the main.
That's just
flaw
draconian.
That's the main flaw with their trespass charge. And of course, like as Noli talked about and as I talked about, my devices are assisted devices. I use them every day, and they are covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So even if there's a policy or a law, even if there's a law that says you can't go in, like in court, they have, it's not a law, but they have a judge's order banning electronics. Well, I've used my electronics in court. It's taken over 2 years to do so, because in district court trial, they wouldn't let me in with anything. They tried to issue a permit, trying to say, if you use these devices in any way that we don't think you should use them, then we're going to sanction you and you could be held in contempt. And like, okay, well, that's threats, coercion, intimidation that directly violates the ADA. And so they didn't give that permit to me in a way that I could read myself. They sent it to me in an image file, so I couldn't even read it. And two, I didn't accept any permits. I reject any permits. Anybody that tries to think that they can permit your human rights, like give you a permit for your human rights, like they can go fuck themselves, right?
Right.
Like, sorry, these are inalienable. I have these, like all human beings have these. So I rejected their permits. Like, no, the court can't permit my human rights. I have them whether you think I do or not. Like, you just have to step out of the fucking way and honor my human rights. But I went to district court without my devices because I wasn't gonna play the game of having them hold me in contempt for trying to go in with the devices I use every day. And previously, like Noli mentioned it in the different case in Rockingham County, when I tried to go to court in district court for that with my devices, they wouldn't let me in the courthouse. They slammed the door in my face. They let my attorney go in, and then I couldn't follow. And then a few minutes later, they came out and kidnapped me from the courthouse steps for not going in to see the judge. And then instead of taking me to see the judge, they took me straight to jail, and then tortured me in jail for a few days by putting me in a brightly lit isolation cell where I had a migraine. And since they were not ADA accessible in the jail, they transferred me to the maximum security prison in Raleigh.
Maximum security. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So with the Skillford case,
for YouTube videoing on a public, again, for trying to exist, for trying to be, for trying to learn, for trying to communicate with others, for trying to shop, it makes me so damn angry, and it makes Noli angry, I know. And when she started talking to me about this, it got me angry. And this is the way change happens, is we have to talk to each other and make each other aware of these kinds of stories. And again, I'm so sorry all this is happening to you, Mike, but and I appreciate you being here and sharing this with us and going through it so that everybody else can hear it and they can support you. There's some links in the description below where you can follow Mike's YouTube channel, where you can support him with PayPal. He's got court fees and legal fees, of course, to maintain. Anything that anyone can do, even a couple of bucks, certainly helps. Again, I wanted to continue. I'll let you continue, Mike.
Yeah. So both these cases are pending. The Guilford County one that we've been talking about with the attack in the health department, and turns out, like Noli said, they put me in the hospital. I have neuropathy in both wrists, and we think that's because they probably left the cuffs on for way longer than they should have. They should have never used cuffs in the first place. There's no need for cuffs. But
you could have.
You could if indeed somebody thought there was probable cause to do an arrest, you can effect an arrest without force. Like it's North Carolina General Statute 15A-401 is how to effect an arrest by a police officer, and force is not required. Like, it's in the fucking law, right?
know the statute numbers.
Yeah. So the problem is, like, the cops aren't trained, and the security guards aren't trained, and these people in these government positions aren't trained. Right? If they had any ounce of training in the ADA or any compassion, they can recognize, oh yeah, these are assistive devices. In fact, the security guards themselves previously recognized they were assistive devices the very first time I visited, and it was the same security guards at that courthouse. So they can't say that they didn't know, right? Because they themselves acknowledged that they were assistive devices the very first time we met, but they didn't know how to facilitate accommodations because they don't have any training in the ADA. Their disability coordinator doesn't make sure the staff is trained in the ADA. They should make sure that security guards are trained, because they're the ones that are going to be facing people that come in with disabilities. Like, and so yeah, that didn't happen. But I appealed the district court decision in open court. That judge, she sentenced me to probation, like a year of probation, and then I appealed her, in open court, and told her, this is going to go to Superior Court. In North Carolina, you get an appeal de novo, which means that the district court level essentially didn't happen. And so yeah, it's like it's a bench trial at district court. It's kind of like a warm up, essentially. Even though it's going to cost you a few $1,000s to hire an attorney if you hire an attorney. So if you are in North Carolina, like I would recommend just, if you have the capacity, the ability to study some case law and some statutes, to give it a go yourself the first time. And then if you lose at district court, like you get a free redo at Superior Court with the jury. And then if you want to hire an attorney, then go for it there. That would be my recommendation. It's not legal advice, but just from my experience, seems like a waste of money to hire an attorney for district court. So even though I appealed her decision, she still wanted the person from the probation office to come to the courtroom to try to get my information. She had already asked my attorney for my information, like where I lived, like my address, because we left the state after, like Noli said, after these things happened. We tried to go all the way up to the governor's office, to the legislators' offices, to the State Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, like all these different branches of state government, some federal government, to say, hey, there's got to be checks and balances. There's got to be somebody that wants to fix this and make sure this doesn't happen. And that got nowhere. So since we got nowhere going through these quote unquote official channels, then we took to the streets. I had a sign, one-man protest. Mrs. Justice was there recording, and we were mobbed, by people that came out and in support of the police and their criminal activities. And this was during Constitution Week in 2020, which is just adds irony, insult to injury. So they attacked and stole my sign, tore it to pieces. There was a bounty, like a $500 bounty on that sign. And even though we didn't have a sign anymore, the mob still followed us around, still dumped a bunch of, diesel fumes at us. Still had people like driving by and saying, hey, we're gonna follow you to your house. We're gonna, come for you and your kids, and like all this craziness. And that didn't stop. It wasn't to that level other times, but they were, protests, full on protests, protesting just me, like an individual. Like it was pretty insane. The newspaper was the biggest newspaper in that county, like covered it, and like that was their whole piece, was like how the town and all these people in the county came to protest one man, try to run us off. And so the death threats continued. Like we had people come by the house all hours of the night. So we decided to move out of there, and not just out of the town, but out of the state. And we did that early 2021, I think. And so then now all these state actors have been trying to get our address, or the new place that we reside, ever since. And so this judge took every opportunity she could in district court in Rockingham County, and that's Michelle Fletcher, is her name. She tried to get our address. She asked my attorney. He didn't know because I didn't tell him where we fucking live. And so he couldn't tell her. And then she tried doing that when I was in the room. She tried doing that with him, with me not. And when I was in the courtroom, then she tried to get it for me. I said, well, I'm not going to get that information. And then she's like, okay, well, she sentenced me to probation. And then I appealed her, which means that gets reversed, like it never happened. And she still wanted the probation officer to come in and try to get my address. And thankfully, the probation officer was like, no, if he appealed you, like, I don't have any business doing anything with them. It's in Superior Court now. So it's been pending in Superior Court since September. I've had a couple pretrial hearings, I think 4 so far, actually 3, just the third one went 2 days. And all of those have been via WebEx. All of those they've granted my accommodations to have my note-taking devices, i.e. audio and video recording. They granted my accommodation request to have my phone and computer to have access to my notes for preparation material. I've had auxiliary aid in there with me, somebody that's there to help me with my memory and help me with my notes, and not for visual assistance. I asked for a visual interpreter. They didn't provide one for the first 2 hearings, but those first 2 hearings, there was just administrative. It was just talking with a judge, basically. And there wasn't any live visual information that was super important. So I was like, okay, I can go ahead and go without a visual interpreter.
Yeah, but the fact that they're even making you have to choose is so angering in the first place. It's. I'm really sorry to interrupt you and cut you off, but I have to say that, like, you're almost flippant, and it's upsetting to me that it's so normal to you that this has been happening, and it's just like, nah, whatever, nah. And so they just did that to me, and like,
compared
so I'm sorry. Can I do that for you, please? Can I just do that for you?
Compared to being beaten down and put in the hospital, compared to being kidnapped and then thrown into a prison and being tortured in prison, like that, we're leaps and bounds from what they started off with. So yes, it's fucked up still. It's still discrimination. It's still not equal access, but there's baby steps. This is like bizarre world backwards. Like, again, the courts are super corrupt, and so on March 1st,
your perspective. Sorry, I just appreciate your perspective. Thank you. So again, I had to get that out, and I'm sure everybody's like flipping out and going the same thing. And how are you just so calm about this? And again, just thank you. Really.
On March 1st, 2022, so just this year, right? This month actually, for the first time ever, and this hearing was scheduled for March 2nd, mind you, but on March 1st, I finally got confirmation from the North Carolina Administrative Offices of the Court, NCAOC, that they approved the Visual Interpreter Services, IRA, which I recommended, a long time ago, and they kept saying, "No, we can't do it. Okay, we can't do it," and I kept sending them different parts of the ADA that says, you know what, a lack of technical assistance is not a valid excuse for not providing a accommodation, and you guys have to provide accommodations and modifications. You don't have a choice. And the person with disability gets primary consideration. And not only that, but the person with disability can't be forced to accept the level of accommodation or modification that you offer. So like all of that together says they have to do what the person with disability needs them to do to have equal access. Like, right? There's the only caveats to that is if what you're asking is an undue burden, like it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars to put in an elevator when they have a ramp, or they have an elevator that's a little bit further down, right? Or they can move the courtroom from the second floor to the first floor, right? There's another way to accommodate, but it's not going to cost them $10,000 or $20,000 to put in an elevator. So undue burden is one thing. The second thing is if it's a fundamental change to what they're doing. And none of my stuff is a fundamental change to anything. Like the fundamental aspect is they charge somebody with a crime, they force that person into court, they go through the court process. You can do that all digital. It's been happening for years. It's been happening way more since 2020 with all the lockdowns. So like they have the capacity to do it. They don't have an argument to not do it. And as far as they're not providing a digital interpreter, they said, oh, we don't have one. We don't, the courts have never provided one. We don't have a certified visual interpretation committee that makes certifications to different companies and stuff like that. They say they talked to the State Department of Health to find out if there's anything that they knew about. And they said, oh, they didn't say, they didn't have any. They said that's not a thing. And it's like, okay, well, here's Aira.io. It is a thing. They're international and they provide qualified visual interpretation services to anyone in the world. So you don't have an excuse. Like, here's a service, you guys can pay for it, it would work fine. And then finally on March 1st this year, they did it and they approved it. I had visual interpretation services in court for the first time on March 2nd this year, and then again on March 15th when that it was an evidentiary hearing, suppression hearing, and that reconvened on the 15th of March. We didn't. The judge granted all the pretrial motions up to the suppression hearing, and on the suppression thing, we're still waiting on his official order that says which way he's ruling. So we're still waiting on that. You know, if he denies it, then it'll be set for trial date. And I still have several pretrial motions that I've sent into the clerk's office that they were refusing to receive it and file it. So I have another discrimination issue with them denying me access to the clerk to even continue with filing my own motions.
Again, how many more things are they going to throw at you that's just going to try to make it uncomfortable, difficult, and you're a citizen, you're a veteran, and again,
yeah, so that,
and who's listening? That's the problem. Is how do we get in touch with anybody that can actually do some things? And again, everybody really wants to help. So, is there anything we can tell people? And I know you're building up. You're probably leading up to things that we can do. But other than than PayPal, are there any other ways we can support what you're doing right now?
Well, I mean, I appreciate, and you keep bringing up PayPal. I appreciate anybody that wants to help in that way. I don't have an attorney doing this. I'm doing this pro se. So
you're doing a better job than that attorney you had.
he actually said that. He actually said that in the court. Yeah. So I don't have court costs as far as that goes. Like unless I'm going to pay myself for all the hours I spend, researching case law and statutory law and things like that, which is silly. I don't need to do that. We have incurred, since this all started, we've incurred about $80,000 of costs to us. Yeah, just trying to fight these 3 criminal cases in 3 different counties. And the Rockingham County one, they still have the $50,000 that Mrs. Justice had to go get a personal loan to be able to cover, because they wanted it cash only to get me out of prison. $50,000 cash only.
50,000 cash. Like you have to show up with a briefcase. Well, it's a big bundle.
Yeah, she literally,
fucking money.
She literally had to go with a friend and cameras and go to 3 different banks to get enough cash to put in a backpack and take to the the magistrate's office, and then they had to count it by hand because guess what? They don't issue cash bonds and that kind of amount. They didn't have a money counter, a bill counter to actually count it in any kind of efficient way. They had to count it by hand.
But they demanded cash.
Right. Just to make it more difficult
Yeah, so
in every way, shape, and form at every step.
So the ways you can help, I mean, I don't know if this is going to help at all, but we're just trying to rack in our brains. You know, the ways you can help are just getting the word out. I think if it gets enough attention, you know, if it gets enough national or international attention, then that usually forces change. I think that's probably the best way to do it. I don't know how to go about doing that. I think the Blind Justice Channel has been throttled a lot. And so I don't know, you know, we're doing the best we can to try to let people know what's going on. There is a link I think Noli has, and I think she passed it on to you, where we compiled different points of contact for county administrators or just county points of contact and state points of contact, both with the courts and with the county. And it has their positions and phone numbers and emails and things like that. So if anybody wants to reach out those ways and try to redress the government, you know, petition the government for redress of grievances, like which is a part of the First Amendment.
Professional when you do it.
Right. Yeah. Be professional. That's in there. You know, don't harass or threaten anybody. We don't support any kind of violence or even threats of violence. And definitely
don't want to do that.
Don't try to tamper with or intimidate any of the witnesses, because a few of them still work in county positions. So.
Wow. Okay. Good
Several
advice.
of them are related to each other too.
Is it about, like, you know, phone calls to local officials? Again, I know that the elected officials are also involved in this, and they're related to the people who are the sheriffs. Are we talking about state senate? Are we talking about county? Anything?
There's a list. I think Noli.
Yep, I just posted it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a list. There's a document there that has all these different things. A lot of them are the disability coordinators at the courthouse and for the county and for the state. And then I think you have like county manager, county commissioners, things like that. But you know, I'm not holding my breath because we went through that route. We've gone through this route for over 2 years, you know, and trying to get the actual government officials to hold themselves accountable and hold their underlings accountable. It hasn't gotten us anywhere. The police department. So the guy that Alfonso Boyce, the guy that slammed me to the ground and was responsible for giving me another brain injury and put me in the hospital with neuropathy in my wrists, like he committed at least 4 felonies that we've been able to identify in this whole ordeal, right? So he's committed at least 4 felonies in this, and they're charging me with 2 nothing burger misdemeanors that, you know, no violence, no anything, and I have no record, right? And so when I tried to file charges or have the police department at least investigate my allegation of charges of these felonies in High Point Police Department, I think a captain called me back and said, "Hey, yeah, we're familiar with this case, but you're currently being prosecuted, so we're not going to investigate." And I'm like, hold on. So you're telling me that if there's an incident and there's 2 people involved and one person, I'll say John, attacks Jeff and severely injures Jeff, but John happens to take the unconscious Jeff to a magistrate and charges Jeff with something, that when Jeff finally comes to and wants to file charges against John, his attacker, you're not going to investigate because the magistrate already accepted charges? Like, this can't be how you guys operate. And he's like, well, this is what we're doing. I'm like, okay, well, what do you suggest I do? And he's like, well, you need to talk to the prosecutor's office and see if they will prosecute and do an investigation to prosecute him. So I said, okay. I called the prosecutor's office and said the same thing. I said, hey, you know, you guys need to investigate the felonies that this guy committed. You know, and we've got evidence of it. You have the evidence of it. And are you going to investigate this guy's felonies? And the prosecutor's like, oh, I can't talk to you about the case. I'm like, no, I'm not asking to talk about my case. I want somebody from the prosecutor's office to investigate this guy
case, right?
For crimes. Yeah. I mean, it's associated with the same event, but essentially it's going to be a different case. You're going to be a different defendant. You're charging somebody else with multiple felonies. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. So
It's unbelievable. Like,
we reached out to the High Point City Council and the High Point Mayor's office. It's like, hey, you guys realize your police department's refusing to investigate, even do an investigation to see, yeah, we should file felony charges on this guy. Essentially, they're saying, as long as somebody has a contract with the government here, because he wasn't a government person, he's a security guard, worked for a private security company, and this private security company has a contract with the government, with the county. Essentially, the High Point Police Department, and supported by the mayor and the city council, is saying, as long as a contractor has a contract with the county, with the local government, they can beat the shit out of disabled people and won't be charged.
Yep.
and now it's
Fucking
it's
disgusting.
public record, and they can now use that as precedent on top of it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's beyond stunning. Noli, you've been quiet, pretty quiet.
Oh, I always am when he's talking. I can get pretty excited. He knows how I get. He knows me. He's not new. And if I start talking, I'm gonna start yelling, and he already knows. He lived it.
Oh man. Okay. God, there's so many nuances and so many different components to this case. I want to hear the story again. Can you tell everyone the story about the checking your ID in the car, which again was another story that I watched the video and I couldn't believe what the hell I was watching. But
Yeah,
for everybody
so
else's
that was-
benefit.
Sure, that was just a few weeks after being attacked in the health department. So the health department attack was February 4th, 2020. And then the other one was February 21st, 2020. And that was in Madison, North Carolina, in Rockingham County. We had finally found a place to stay, and it was one of our first nights in town. And we have a couple teenagers and a couple toddlers. And so the teenagers, we've got a built-in babysitter team.
Yeah.
They were with the littles, and their mom and I wanted to go explore the town. It was a Friday
What were
night.
you doing? What were you doing though? What were you? You were playing something, right? What was that? What were you playing?
Yeah, Pokemon Go. Yeah, yeah, of all things, right? But
Could
yeah,
anything be more innocent than playing
Yeah.
Pokemon Go?
yeah. But it was February 21st in Madison, North Carolina. It was like 30-degree temperatures, and you can there's a mapping system that I think you can look up and look at different areas to find out if there's Pokemon Go activity, and so you guys can pull it up. You can pull it up and see that Madison, North Carolina, like downtown area, has a bunch of Pokemon, activity stops and gyms and things that people can do things. And so she wanted to go check that stuff out and check out what the nightlife was, because there's a few bars downtown, and there's people, parked up and down the roads because they have street parking. They have a couple town parking lots with people parked in it. And then one of the stops was at a church, and the church is open to the public. It has a public parking lot, and it's not gated or anything. And so church parking lots in North Carolina are considered public vehicular areas, just like a open parking lot, just like street parking. And so she wasn't even parked because technically she was standing. The car was running because it's 30 fucking degrees out, and she's in the car with it running, with the lights on, in a lit parking lot. And it was like 5 minutes or less because she was there doing whatever she was doing with the gym, or trying to find a Pokemon that she didn't have or something. I forget what it was.
Right.
But a car came up behind her. She thought it was another Pokemon player. which happens all the time when you do that. You know, people go to where these things are, and then they drive off, like, you know, a couple minutes and they're gone. So she starts to leave, and then she stops, like, right after she starts to leave. She's like, "There's blue lights, there's a cop behind us." I'm like, "Okay, great." So now we're like scrambling, trying to get our phones to record. I didn't have all my rig with me because we weren't out there doing anything. Like, I didn't have my whole backpack full of extra batteries and stuff like that, because we were just gonna go out for a quick drive around town and then go back home. Didn't plan on getting out of the car. So she, yeah, I think she beat me to the punch and started recording before I did. It takes a minute using my software to get my stuff going. But this cop comes up and he's like, "Hey, give me your guys' IDs." And like right off the bat, we're like, "Okay, who are you?" And he's like, so he told us he was Officer Benfield with the Madison Police Department. I'm like, "Okay, well, why are you stopping us?" And he goes, "I need your IDs." I'm like, "Okay, well, tell us why you're stopping us first." Like, and then he's like, "I need to run your IDs for warrants." And we're like, no, you can't just stop people to run their IDs for warrants. That's not how that works, man. There's the Fourth Amendment. Like, you're secure in your person's papers, houses, and effects. You know, your ID is either a paper or it's an effect. It's one of those two. And yeah, he just kind of went apeshit from there. He demanded IDs more and more. He ran the tag. The tag came back clean. He's threatened to smash her window out like 25 times. The window is cracked. Like, he wanted it all the way down. Like, we can communicate. We can hear him. Like, there wasn't a problem there. And she, you know, after a couple minutes in, she holds up her ID to the window, like shows her ID because she's behind the wheel. So there is a statute in North Carolina that says that you have to present ID if you're the operator of a motor vehicle. So she's, you know, she presented her ID. He wanted to actually have it because, you know, he's a control freak. So he's threatening to smash the window out. So she just like slides it up. He takes it, you know, out of the crack, and then he runs her ID. So at that point, like, you know, again, he had no RES for anything. No suspicion that a crime was being committed. He just wanted to run people for warrants. That's his words, right? And he demanded mine, and she's like, "Well, he doesn't have an ID." Like he doesn't have a driver's license. No, he's blind. He doesn't have a driver's license. And, you know, there's the disabled placards hanging from the rearview mirror. The Washington disabled veteran plates are still on the van. You know, because we had just moved from Washington, and they're permanent plates. So, like, even though we were traveling most of 2019, like, there's no reason to switch it out until we landed somewhere. And again, this was within 2 weeks, or about 2 weeks from when they attacked me on the 4th of February in Guilford County. And because they knocked me unconscious, and I don't carry any kind of ID because I don't have a driver's license, they weren't able to positively ID me in Guilford County, even though they booked me into the jail, and then they unbooked me into the jail and then dumped my unconscious body somewhere. They weren't able to positively ID me, and that's a bigger city, it's a bigger county. And so this little podunk town, you know, we believe this is retaliatory, that they solved the Washington plates. And when he came up, he's like, "Oh yeah, these are the guys that we know, these guys from this Blind Justice channel, and, you know, we need to try to identify this person because we need to show these big city cops how to do it, how to identify." So anyway, he continued his threats to break the window to try to get my ID. And eventually I told Mr. Justice to go home and roll the window down. Like, you know, if he's going to smash it, like, there's no reason to have him smash it if he's going to get in one way or the other. That's why I want my Tesla truck.
You want the Cybertruck? You want to get one of those badass things, huh?
Hell yeah, man! Because then I can put a sidebar. I can put like a bag of sand and get a name tag that says, you know, Elon, and like smack a name tag of Elon in the bag of sand that sits in the driver's seat. Put like a little, you know, volleyball, like smiley head, like a Wilson, you know, with a baseball hat on it. Yeah,
Elon!
And just like put, yeah, exactly. Just make my little Elon driver like that sits there in the driver's seat. And so if the Cybertruck gets pulled over, you know, I'm not rolling the window down, and I'll just be like, "Hey, yeah, just write any tickets out to Elon. He's driving," you know.
Love it.
but I could control it with my phone, because it's self-driving. Like, hey, let's
Right,
go
right,
do
right.
this.
Yeah, it's like an RC car almost. Sure.
Yeah, let's go hang out with Noli, and then they'll find routes to go charge the car all the way to Washington. So.
I mean,
But I'm gonna do it, man. I'm gonna do it. It's gonna be a few years before they start actually rolling them out, but I'm gonna fucking do it. It's gonna be amazing.
Oh yes. Hell yes.
Yeah. So anyway, we did not have shatterproof glass or reinforced bulletproof doors. We were in a Toyota minivan. So she rolls the window down, and he's telling her like, yeah, just roll it down. And she's like, I don't want to roll it down. And she's like, well, he said, why don't you want to roll it down? She's like, I'm terrified of you. If I roll it down, you're gonna rip me out of the car. And he goes, no, I'm not gonna do that. And so he's continuing to threat. She rolls the window down. As soon as it goes down, he reaches in, he unlocks the doors, he opens the door, he reaches in, unbuckles her, and then rips her out of the car, puts her in handcuffs. And then there's a goon on my side trying to do the same thing. I'm telling him, hey man, I've got injuries. They already wrestled the phone out of my hand and threw it on the dashboard. Benfield hands Mrs. Justice off to guys from a different town that came to back him up, and told him to put her in his car. Well, his car is a K9 unit, and the backside is made for a dog. There aren't seats. And so she's like, no, I'm not going in there. That's where the dog goes. And they go, yeah, okay. And so they gladly they didn't throw her in there, but they're holding her in handcuffs in 30-degree weather. So that sucks too. And then Benfield comes back. He climbs in to the van on her side. And I'm like, hey man, we don't consent to any searches and seizures. You need to get out of the van. And he goes, how'd you know I'm in here if you're blind? I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, one, you reek. Two, like anybody can feel if somebody climbs into their van, whether they have their eyes open or closed. Like, like what the fuck's wrong with you, man? I can hear you. Like, there's so many ways I can tell you how I know you that you're in my van. Well, that little section there is conveniently omitted out of the body camera video that they have, that the prosecutor has in this case. And I pointed it out to him, like, hey man, you got altered body cam. He's like, no, I don't. I'm like, okay, we'll play the video that I recorded. So he played the video. I'm skipping ahead. So he played the video, and I'm like, all right, now go to after the driver gets pulled out. All right, now play it from there. And this conversation is there. You have that conversation of me calling up. The video's not there because my phone was wrestled out of my hand in front of the dashboard. But the audio is there of me saying, hey, we don't consent to search and seizures. That whole dialogue is there. It's missing in his body camera. Like, how do you explain that? You're saying your body cam's not altered. Well, clearly it's fucking altered, bro. And he's like, yeah. But they're still trying to prosecute this case. So they are trying to demand the ID from a blind passenger when we were just doing nothing, sitting in a public vehicle area, everywhere but we have every right to be. Not
checking Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
Checking Pokemon Go.
And yep. Yeah. So that's basically the case. Like they got me outside, put me in handcuffs behind my back, 30-degree weather, and then tried to convince me that I had to give ID because they wanted to run me for warrants. They said if I just give ID, tell them my name and date of birth, they'd run me, and then they let me go and be over with. So it was clearly all about running me for warrants, getting me in the system to prove a point, to show the big city cops that they could do what they couldn't do. They confirmed as much when I refused. Actually, I don't think I ever outright said no. I think I said, if you can tell me what crime you're suspecting me of, then you might have something. But until you do that, like you have no authority to demand my ID. So, but they took me instead of to the magistrate, which they're required to do with the warrantless arrest. They're required to take you straight to a magistrate. They took me to the police department for an hour, and that's it's just a few blocks away. And while we were there, the body cams were running because I could still hear him beeping. And his backup, a guy named Matthew Michael, said that, hey, our captain has been tracking you and what you've been doing in Cooper County. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, your activism and your stuff with your YouTube channel. I'm like, oh, okay. So that was, him letting the cat out of the bag, like saying, hey, like, we know who you are before you even came to this town. And this is all about getting your ID.
I guess if you're a cop watcher, they kind of have that the cops are watching the cop watchers, right? I mean, and not just that.
Yeah. So
How did they
you
know?
took
How
me
did they
to-
know you were going to be there? Again, you were not a problem in wherever you were, but I mean,
we didn't do anything in that county. Like we didn't do anything in that county. Like you don't shit where you eat. You know, I'm sure that county is super corrupt, right?
right.
But I wasn't kicking over rocks there quite yet. You know, they wanted to fucking poke the bear, and they got the bear. So that's kind of where that one blew off. Is with that. So they took me to the magistrate. The cop Benfield tried to convince the magistrate, you know, he had a good arrest, and the magistrate's okay. Well, what do you have to say for yourself? And I go, well, he has no RES. He didn't say what crime he was investigating. He just wanted to run us for warrants, and that violates the Fourth Amendment. I have the Fifth Amendment right. I don't have to tell him anything. As a
Right.
passenger, there's no statute that requires a passenger in a car to identify unless you're suspected in a crime. He has no crime he's suspecting of, so we're good to go, right? And the magistrate's like, yeah, that makes sense. Officer Benfield, what do you have to say for yourself? He gives him a second at bat, right? He's like, okay, come on up again. And he's like, well, I was investigating a suspicious vehicle. We got a report about a suspicious vehicle. And he goes, oh, okay, yeah. Okay, all right, Mr. Nelson, what do you got? I'm like, okay, well, suspicious vehicle, is that a misdemeanor or is it a felony in North Carolina? And then he goes, it's a magistrate. He's like, I'm like, it's neither. Suspicious vehicle is not in the criminal code. It's not a crime for somebody to think that your car is suspicious because you have Washington plates and you were sitting in a church parking lot for 5 minutes. Like, it doesn't matter. I could be parked outside the mayor's house. And he's like, I don't know this car. Like, it doesn't matter. He may think that's suspicious. That's not a crime. That's not a
Right.
fucking crime because
No.
somebody thinks, oh, this car is suspicious.
Well,
You know?
and who are they? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's not a crime. Can a cop come up and do a consensual encounter? Sure. Cop can come up. He can knock on the window like, hey, everything all right? And then it's a plain view doctrine. If he looks in and he sees, you know, a fucking dead whore in the back, then all right, yeah, he's got
Well-
something. He's got something he can do something about, you know. But
Sure.
if he looks in and there's a couple of people sitting there like, hey, you know, holding their phones up, like, what do you want? Like, there's no crime. He doesn't see any tools for breaking in. He doesn't see any like gas cans and like, you know, posters like, let's go burn down the church. You know, he doesn't see anything that would be indication of a crime. It's just some people sitting in a car. Like, okay, all right, you guys have a good night. That's it. That's the encounter. Legally, that's what he's required to do. That's not what happened. You know, so I tell this magistrate, hey man, there's no crime. Suspicious vehicle is not a misdemeanor. It's not a felony. He wasn't investigating anything. He said he wanted to run us for warrants. He does not have that right. That violates my rights that are supposedly protected by the Fourth Amendment. So you have a bad arrest. You need to release me. And if you don't release me, you will be named in the lawsuit. And not only that, get my disability coordinator or get your disability coordinator to coordinate for my disabilities. I have a disability advocate that I would like to get on the phone so he can help advocate for me and my disability rights. And he was like, what? No, I can't do anything like that. So the magistrate, you know, denied ADA accommodations all the way through. And in response to being shut down a second time, the magistrate said, hey, you know, just go ahead and take him over there. And over there happened to be like 40 feet down the hall and threw me in a cell, in a holding cell. Before being booked in the jail, they put me in a holding cell so they can discuss for like 20 or 30 minutes with the magistrate and collude and conspire on what to charge me. And it was not just that magistrate. There's another voice that was behind, because there's a glass. There's another voice that was coming from behind that glass. So I don't know if it was another magistrate because it was around midnight. It was around shift change. I don't know. But they conspired for 20 or 30 minutes to try to figure out what to charge me with. And that's, you know, ex parte communication. Like the magistrate is in the position of a judge, and you're not supposed to be able to argue. Like one side's not supposed to be able to communicate and argue to the judge without the other side present. And so that's what this cop was trying to do. I was trying to argue with him, or present his arguments and conspire with him to get a charge to book him in the jail. Eventually, they came up with, you know, resisted late obstruct and booked me in. They stripped me of my assistive devices, of my hat, glasses, my cane. They take your clothes. They give you jail clothes. They put me in isolation, which is another violation of the ADA. Like, you're not supposed to put people with disabilities in isolation because they have disabilities. you're supposed to treat them like anybody else and make accommodations. But they didn't do that. They put me in an isolation cell that's brightly lit, and I had a migraine because of the light.
I mean, what was the need to put you in isolation to begin with in the first place? I mean, wouldn't they have to have justification to do that already?
Yeah, they said it was because I was blind.
To put you in isolation? Wow.
Yep.
Why? Because they were worried
Yeah.
the other prisoners would do something to. I mean, that's for your own protection. Wow. Draconian.
Yeah, and that's
I mean,
why they put children in adult prisons. So yeah,
Draconian.
Yeah, the argument I think is that they think that the inmates would beat me up, or that I could trip and hurt myself, or any other things. It's a padded isolation cell, and yeah, it's against the ADA, 100%. And so I told them this. They didn't give a fuck. They didn't stop. They put me in there. I had a migraine. When I get migraines and they get bad, it renders me unable to move or speak. And so they came in some hours into that, and the jailer said, okay, I got a nurse here to do your intake eval, and I was unable to move or speak. And since she did my blood pressure and said, hey, your blood pressure's through the roof, you're likely to stroke out, you're likely to have a stroke unless I treat you and give you medication. And strokes can be lethal, and especially if you're not being monitored. They're just
Right.
They had me in there. It's not like they had anybody watching me, and it's not like they had anybody with any kind of medical experience watching to see if I was having a stroke. So since I wasn't able to tell her yes or no, she goes, okay, well that's you're not giving me medical consent for something that's life threatening. And then the jailer's like, oh, that means you're suicidal.
What?
And so now we're gonna put you on suicide watch. So we're gonna strip you completely naked and leave you here in this brightly lit cell.
What?
So I was trying to use like a towel or a shirt or something to cover my eyes, but that wasn't enough. And they had stripped all of that away and took everything out of the cell and left me there naked.
God.
And yeah, so that lasted into the next day, until the evening, until Mrs. Justice was able to pay the ransom. The first one was $2,500, but they allowed it to be through a bond, a surety bond. But that doesn't even follow their own pretrial release condition, because it was one nothing burger misdemeanor, nonviolent, and I have no criminal record, which means that if found guilty, I can't even be put in jail. So that means they can't even hold me in jail. They can't put a bond on somebody if they, if the consequence isn't jail. You can't put them in jail and hold them with a bond. That's violates the 8th Amendment. It's cruel and unusual punishment, and it's excessive bond. Like the $2,500 bond is excessive from the go.
Would that be like illegal seizure also? I guess not, because it's not goods.
Well,
it's not the same.
Well, no, that would be from the stop. That'd be from the unlawful arrest, the kidnapping from the stop, from the initial thing. That would be violation of the 4th Amendment, illegal seizure.
Okay.
So that she got me out, and then it was scheduled for court. And when I went to court with my devices, I was familiar with North Carolina courthouses to know that some of them have these electronic device bans. So I called the day before. I was like, hey, do you guys have a ban on this? And the I think it was somebody from the clerk's office was like, yeah, we do. I'm like, okay, well, let me put in my ADA request to be able to use my devices. And she goes, oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm not the person. You're gonna have to come in person tomorrow for your court date and talk to them when you get here. Like, okay. So I did that the next day. My attorney was there, and the DA's office was outside screening people and stuff. This was like mid 2020, and I asked her, like, hey, are you guys gonna make accommodations to the ADA and modify your policy so I can have access with my assistive device? She said, no, we can't do that. And she wanted me to waive my rights, and I'm like, to counsel. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna sign any waiver of rights. She's like, well, you have to. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm retaining my rights. Her response is priceless. It's probably one of my favorite clips that we have. It's for saying, well, that's not how we do things here. Like, just somebody invoking their rights. the district attorney's office, Stephanie Reese, I think is her name. She said, well, that's not how we do things here. We make everybody waive their rights here at this courthouse. Jeez. But so it's I mean, you can laugh at it or you
Judge
can
tried
cry.
getting you to waive your rights too.
Oh, I mean, all of them have.
You're
If you've
trying to be
watched any of
slick
the
about
stuff,
it too.
yeah, all of them have. But so my attorney goes in and the prosecutor asks for a failure to appear warrant because I'm outside, and they wouldn't let me in. Thankfully, the judge didn't go for it that time. But when we came back to court, whenever it was, a month or two later, it was the same situation. Like we got it actually in writing from the judge, Chris Freeman, district court judge, who said that if I tried to go to court with my devices, that he'd hold me in contempt, like criminal contempt. And so I said, hey man, you can't do this. This is threats, coercion, intimidation. You have all the thing, trying to teach them the ADA. They don't know it. Trying to teach them federal law, right? They didn't care. He's a judge. He thinks he can don the cloak of absolute immunity, judicial immunity. And that's not the case when it comes to ADA issues. They're administrative issues, and judges actually don't have judicial immunity. That means that they personally can be sued and are going to be sued. Like we're working on that lawsuit that will be filed shortly that names a shit ton of these state actors, including several judges, and Chris Freeman being one of them. So, I told him these things and didn't get a response from him before court. So I needed clarifications on like what was going on. We got there, same thing. The attorney went in. They wouldn't let me in. They closed the door in my face. They were there in force. They had several deputies outside for me. And just a few minutes later, their Captain Bolins, or I can't, that's his name, Captain Bolins. Their head honcho deputy came out and kidnapped me right there on the courthouse steps because the judge ordered it. And instead of taking me to the judge, which is the whole point of doing that, right, of capturing somebody under failure to appear, is to take them before the court. Well, they didn't. They didn't take me before the court. They took me straight to jail. Did not pass go. Did not collect $200. And it was the same thing. They stripped me of my devices and tossed me in the isolation cell, same isolation cell, same brightly lit cell. And again, had another migraine for that rest of that day and the next day. And they tried doing court with me on the ground, trying to hide under this plastic cot that you put your bed on, that I made a lean-to out of to try to block the light. So I'm trying to hide from the light with that. I've got a towel wrapped around my eyes. They didn't strip me naked this time. They let me have my stuff because of the ADA complaints and stuff I put in afterwards. So I at least had clothing and towels and bedding. But that didn't last. They took that stuff away after court because they lied to the judge. The jailer said that the nurse checked me out, and the nurse said I was good to go, and that I was pretending, when the nurse never checked me out until afterwards, after court. And even then, she refused to check me out. She said, "Oh, I can't do an evaluation unless you're sitting up," and I couldn't move. So, yeah.
Every step
Mr.
along
Justice,
the way.
yeah, I mean, it's fucking crazy. And so, because they weren't ADA accessible, Judge Grogan ordered that they transfer me to the maximum security prison in Raleigh for quote unquote safekeeping. And so they transferred me there and held me there in isolation, again, another isolation room for 10 days. And there was similar conditions where they left the lights on in there for hours and hours. And eventually I was able to communicate and talk to one of the doctors and say, hey, these are my conditions. I can't function in bright lights. I think I was able to have my glasses at least. They took my hat, and then I just had but they had me in I forgot about this. They had me in the suicide smock, so naked with this like heavy Velcro suicide blanket thing. Like that.
Again,
that
further
was-
humiliation. I mean, part of this, honestly, as part of their game, is this shaming, this dehumanization, this humiliation that they try to impart on anybody that tries to hold them accountable, anybody that is questioning what they're doing, anybody that is trying to shine a light on this. And
Yeah.
oh man, Just,
Yeah.
wow.
So that's yeah. So eventually, she paid the $50,000 ransom, and they transferred me out, put me on house arrest, and told me that I couldn't go anywhere except for court, talk to my lawyer, and doctor's appointments, and that was it. So couldn't engage in any kind of religious activity, could go out and exercise, could go to the grocery store. So then next time went around, with the court, without any devices, because if we lived there, and I couldn't risk any of that blowing back on our family, and yeah, the stakes were high, so we went. It was another sham of a district court trial. Again, the prosecution didn't have any evidence, and he even argued his whole argument, like his witness, quote unquote witnesses, were some officers, and they said they didn't see any crimes committed from the stand. That's what they said. They said, look, they didn't see any crimes. And so the prosecution then argued, okay, it's okay for police to make mistakes. That was his argument. So it's okay for police to make mistakes, but Mr. Nelson has a basic disrespect for law enforcement, so you should find him guilty for resisting a public officer. And the judge is like, yeah, guilty. And 12 months probation, and you have to write an apology letter. Like, because he couldn't, like, jail time wasn't on the table. Like, he could not put jail time because of I had no record, and this is a nothing. So instead of appealing immediately in open court, we waited a few days, strategically, to find out when he was not going to be on the bench, because this was the same guy that wrote the order to hold me in contempt if I dare go to court with my devices. So we wanted a different judge to be on the bench before going in and filing the appeal to Superior Court at the clerk's office.
Mhm.
Well, they must have had, spies or whatever, having the clerk's office to alert the judge, Chris Freeman, whenever that appeal came in, because my attorney went in.
We lose you?
He had a bunch of other business. Like, before he's able to leave the courthouse, the bailiffs tracked him down and said, hey, the judge wants you in this courtroom. So Chris Freeman tagged in from whatever other judge was on the bench, and he took his spot on the bench so that he can order my attorney to get me there the same day to have a pretrial release conference. Now, it had been in the Superior Court. Like, we appealed it. As soon as it got filed at the clerk's office, it's no longer in district court, it's Superior Court. Chris Freeman is a district court judge. He has no business in that case as soon as the appeal was filed. But he ordered my attorney to get me there in 2 hours. And so he calls Mrs. Justice answered because I was down with migraine again. And he's like, he's not going anywhere. He can't do anything. And so he's like, well, shit. So, he went in by himself, and he's like, hey, yeah, he can't be here. He's not well, and you didn't give him notice. Like, this is violation of due process. And there's like, yeah, whatever. We're gonna do this anyway. We're gonna put an appeal bond on him in the amount of $50,000. So we had district court trial. It means that the $50,000 bond should have came back, but didn't come back. They were still holding on to it because they were waiting to find out if I was gonna appeal. As soon as I appealed, he punished me for appealing his decision and said, you know what, we're gonna put a bond on you for $50,000, and we're gonna put you on house arrest in the same conditions. Can't go anywhere but the court, to see your attorney, and to medical appointments. Well, this was in the fall of 2020, and what happened in November 2020? Anybody?
Was there an election of some kind? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah,
happened
yeah.
in November 2020.
Yeah, there's a fucking presidential election in 2020. They wouldn't even let me go partake in the presidential election.
Wait, they
That
denied
makes
you from
sense.
voting
What
because
did
you
they
couldn't
do?
bring your recording devices and your ADA approved assisted devices to the
No,
voting
not,
booth.
no.
No?
That
Is
that wasn't the problem because
Jeez.
before all that nonsense, I'd been working with them to make sure they actually had the voting machine accessible, I could use it. They have different machines that you can use if you're visually impaired. That it reads the ballot. There's different ways that little controllers and things you do to go down the ballot and mark what you want. Yeah, I've been working with them and the county board of elections to make sure that they had that in place. That wasn't the problem. The problem was they put me on house arrest, and they said I couldn't go anywhere except for court and to doctor's appointments. So if I dare show up to go elect, to go to the elections to go vote, like
That's fucking illegal as fuck.
yeah, yeah.
That's fucking.
So-
I don't know. Maybe I just fucking wasn't paying attention, but I didn't know about that part.
Yeah, so eventually it got set for a Superior Court hearing for pretrial stuff, and one of the main things was the pretrial release conditions. So we went for that, and when we went there, this judge dropped the house arrest. And so at that point, it was 40 days of house arrest. 40 days of house arrest. They had me in the jail, the county jail, 2 days the first time, and then 2 days the second time. So that's 4 days of jail, and then 10 days in prison. So a total of 54 days of some form of incarceration. Now, if I was the maximum sentencing bracket, the maximum sentence they could give if found guilty is 60 days in jail.
wow.
And they're still prosecuting the case. They're still prosecuting the case. I've already paid with the interest, just the interest alone on the $50,000 because they still have it. We've paid over $5,000 on the interest payments for the loan, just for that,
Fucking bullshit.
just for that alone. And they've had that $50,000 in an account gaining interest for the county. So it's insane. The judge, when he dropped the house arrest, he kept the $50,000 bond. And at no point in the earlier district court thing or in the Superior Court thing did the prosecution argue anything for pretrial release conditions. And so they have to actually, by law, they have to argue, not just argue, but they have to show facts and evidence to a judge that the person is a flight risk, that they are a danger to themselves or others. Right? They have to show these things in order to get a bond. It's required. It's this with the law
Right.
works. But at no point have they done this in any level. Have they done this? When they kidnapped me on the courthouse steps, they've never charged me with failure to appear. I've never been charged for failure to appear.
Well,
The
because you haven't
guidelines
failed to
for-
appear, really. I mean, technically, you really haven't
Right.
failed to appear. That's
Right.
that's why they can't charge you with that.
You were there. You were fucking there. I seen it.
Right.
We've got it on
Right.
tape. Yeah, there's tape.
Yeah. The guidelines for that is if you are charged with failure to appear, the maximum, or they're supposed to, the recommendation is for them to do 2 times whatever the previous bond was. Well, the previous bond was already illegal because I told you it was $2,500, but they can't put a bond on you if you can't serve jail time if found guilty. So I mean, even if we say we give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, it was $2,500, well, 2 times 2,500 is fucking 5,000, not 50,000. And it's
Yeah.
not just it's not just 50,000. It's 50,000 cash only.
Cash,
Right? So
right.
it's it's insane. So that it went to that Superior Court judge when he said about he dropped the house arrest, but when it came to the 50,000, the prosecution again made no argument. He was silent. And we're like, hey, judge, there's been no argument for this. There's no facts to this. You know, he's not a fight risk. He's always shows up in court. And the judge goes, well, his response was so idiotic. He goes, did an other judge put that bond? And my attorney's like, well, yeah, of course. Like that's who puts bonds. What are you talking about? He's like, well, I'm not gonna change something that another judge did. When literally a minute before, that's exactly what he just fucking did when he dropped the house arrest. Like,
I'm telling you, it's like Kafkaesque in every step, every way, shape, form, man.
yeah. So this case
High
is
Point,
still
North-
pending.
In High Point, North Carolina. All this is happening in High Point for the most part?
No, that the first one, the health department one was High Point, North Carolina. This one was in Madison, North Carolina. It's Rockingham County.
Mhm.
And yeah, so it's been sitting in the Superior Court, you know, all this time since the fall of 2020. And I fired my attorney because he wasn't helping me get access to the courts. He did a shit job in district court. He didn't make the arguments I told him to make. He didn't put me on the stand when I told him to. He didn't present any evidence in either case. Yeah, it just if you want to hear it for yourself, it's the district court trial for the High Point one is we have audio for that. And they tried to hide it. Like, they actually didn't release it to me. They released it to him. That was the last thing he did in that case, was get it. So
Everyone who's not
They wanted-
everyone who's not subscribed to the Blind Justice YouTube channel, please subscribe to it. There is a historical record and an entire series of videos documenting everything that's happened to Mike extensively. We're just covering, you know, some high level things, and Mike's going through it, and I really appreciate him doing that. But please go there, like those videos, share them to your Facebook, share them to your Twitter, share them everywhere around, because people need to hear this story for sure.
yeah, so where we are currently in that one, we had court, Superior Court in January 24th this year. The judge denied my ADA requests outright, like all of them at first. So he's like, you got to be in person, and you can't bring any device or anything. I'm like, well, what the fuck, man? So, and this is Superior Court level. So then I wrote back and gave more detailed, like, hey, instructions. This is my ADA requests, like this stuff I need to have. And so then he granted half of it. And then, like he said I couldn't take anything that was recording, so I couldn't take any form of notes. He said they wouldn't provide a visual interpreter. He said I could take my phone and my headset so I can actually access my court preparation material, and I can have my auxiliary aid.
Yeah, thanks.
And he said I couldn't use my hat or my glasses. And I'm like, well, like what? So I wrote back again. I'm like, no, these are the reasons I need all these things, and you guys are required to provide these things. And he's like, well, I'm not going to provide anything but these hat and glasses. I guess I'll allow you to have those. And then I'm like, okay, that's still not equal access. I still can't take any notes, and I still can't have access to visual information. And this was supposed to be set like for trial. This was the pre-trial day where we're going to do evidentiary hearing, like suppression, motion to suppress. There's going to be evidence to put on, and a lot of the evidence is video, like visual, and there's like no visual interpretation. So, and because he responded, and by the way, he didn't respond until, so the 24th of January was a Monday. He didn't respond until the Friday before that, and in the afternoon. So literally less than one business day before I was supposed to be in court, as he finally responding to my ADA request I made weeks in advance. And he shouldn't be responding anyway, because ADA matters are administrative and not judicial. So it's not his fucking job. It's an administrator, a disability coordinator is supposed to be doing this, not a fucking judge. So, and because he denied my stuff improperly and illegally, I then filed a motion to dismiss that Friday afternoon based on the due process violations that I wasn't given equal access to the courts. So we went in that Monday morning, and oh, here's the icing on the cake. You're gonna love this, Indy.
Mm-hmm.
A few days before that, the prosecutor filed a motion to continue because the prosecutor had tested positive for COVID. And the
So
judge
their
said,
health and their access to technology and to the tools is clearly then taking priority and more important than yours. Is that what they're?
hold on. So
Here
the
we go.
judge didn't rule on it. He didn't rule on that motion. He just instead he sent via email or whatever communication. He said, "No, prosecutor, you're going to be in person in the courtroom on Monday morning," and so is the defendant. So I'm being ordered into the courtroom with a
somebody
prosecutor.
who's identified to have COVID already.
Yes, yes. And my auxiliary aide is a 60-year-old man.
Vulnerable.
And so
on top of it.
Yeah. So we go in, and my aide, like he tested himself beforehand, and he's like, "Hey, I'm negative." I'm like, "Good. We want to make sure we're not bringing anything in." So he tested himself. He was negative. So we went in. The judge was like, "Hey," right off the bat, he started to threaten me. This. I don't think this is released on the channel quite yet, because the next series that Mr. Justice thinks is gonna work on and release is the Rockingham County series. But you guys can hear this, like the judge threatens me, like he's like, "Take off your blindfold," because I put my scarf around my eyes because the lights were so intense in the courtroom, that my hat and glasses weren't enough. And I was like, "Well, judge, if you can just lower the lights, then the scarf can come off." But it's just too much for me to handle. I'm gonna get a migraine. I'll be unable to communicate. And he's like, "No, this is theatrics, whatever." He accused me of not being genuine or faking or whatever, and was threatening me to take it off. And so I signaled to my aide that, "Hey, I'm being threatened and intimidated, and you can't do that, And so the judge is like, "Oh, well, okay, I'm not ordering you yet to take it off." So then I clarified, even though that's not how the English language works. If the judge is saying, "You take this off, you do this right now, you need to take this off right now," that's clearly a fucking order, right?
Right.
So he backsteps, and then I articulate, like, this is an ADA request for reasonable modification for effective communication, and then he didn't respond to that. So he just kind of moved on and said move to his next target, which is my aide, and he threatened my aide. He's like, "Well, here's this document. It's a waiver of rights and a waiver of counsel form, like the thing that I mentioned in the district court, where the prosecutor outside said, 'No, this is how we do things here,' right?" He's like, "You need to read this to him." And I'm like, "No, don't accept that." And so he tells the judge, like, he's telling me not to accept it. And then, he's like, "Well, bailiff, give it to Mr. Nelson himself." I'm like, "No, I can't read this, man. Like, you agreed. Part of my ADA request that you agreed to was that you would send all documents to me in OCR format via email, so I can actually read the documents. You
Right.
agreed to that accommodation. Like, why are you trying to hand me a piece of paper? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?" And so the judge ordered the bailiff to give it to my aide, and he ordered my aide to accept it, and he ordered my aide to act as my visual interpreter and read it to. And he's not qualified for that. I didn't ask to do any of the visual stuff like that. That's not why he's there. And he can't threaten my aide to do anything legally. I mean, he can do whatever he wants because, they're all powerful, but he's breaking the law in doing so. So that's what he did. And then he found out the prosecutor has like 7 hours of video, like body cam, dash cam, and stuff to review for the case. And he's like, "Well, I want to make these available to Mr. Nelson. So, he can't say that he wasn't given an opportunity." I'm like, well, judge, you didn't provide a visual interpreter. So you're absolutely, that's what's going on. Like, you're not allowing me to review this video. Like, this is ridiculous. And he's like, "No, your aide's going to be there to interpret for you." I'm like, "No, that's not his job. He doesn't work at your pleasure. He works at my pleasure. He's here helping me. Like, you can't order him to be my interpreter." And 28
Right,
CFR
it's not a
35.160
legal-
subsection C says that you can't do that.
He's not legally appointed as a guardian or somebody who can legally represent you or speak for you or anything
Right.
like that. I mean, that's wow.
Right. Yeah. So I told him, I put the judge on notice, you can't do that. This violates the ADA. Like, it's 28 CFR 35.160 subsection C. You can't force a person with disability to bring another person to act as their interpreter.
I mean, it's straight up discrimination. I mean, how is that not an absolutely clear case of discrimination?
So we, he's like, "Well, you guys can review, like, that's a lot of footage. You review that footage with the the prosecutor, and I think it was like I think I misspoke. It's not 7 hours. I think it's like 3 hours of footage. I think it's what it's supposed to be. He's like, you guys, do that and then take a lunch break and be on recess until 3 p.m. So like, he's like, you guys go to this other room with the prosecutor. So we start to leave, and then there's a hubbub behind me. Well, a friend who acted as my auxiliary aide in this same case in Superior Court just months before, was in the audience, and I couldn't even hear him because he said it so low. But he had already had a bailiff like hovering over him because he was shaking his head at the threats that the judge was already doing. Like he was just visually showing that he disapproved by shaking his head. That was it. That was his gestures. That the judge later would claim were threatening gestures, was him shaking his head. The bailiff like went to go tattle to daddy, and he's like, "Oh, this guy said something," and so then the judge told him to stand up and to identify himself. And he's like, "Why do you want me to identify myself?" And he was calm. He was, polite. He's like, "Just why do you want me to identify myself?" He's like, "Well, I need to know. We've had threats in this case, and we need to know who you are. We need to know who everybody is." And he's like, "Well, you haven't asked anybody else in the audience who they are." And he said, "Yeah, I have," which is not true. Like, he said he identified everybody, which isn't true. Like he identified the litigants that were there for the docket, but not everybody else that was in the audience. And you can hear that in the audio whenever it gets released, because after he kicks this guy out, he orders him out of the courtroom and then out of the courthouse. Then he goes and asks people to identify themselves to try to cover his tail.
Again, draconian.
Yeah. So, we were forced into this. We were forced into this room with this COVID positive and symptomatic. You can hear the prosecutor like coughing up a lung every time he's talking. It's like, holy crap, right? So
They're risking people's fucking lives. It's bullshit.
Yeah. So I point out, just the audio discrepancy in his body camera and in my video. I'm like, here you go, man. You have tampered evidence that you're trying to play with. What the hell are you doing? He's like, oh, it's not tampered. I'm like, okay, play this video. And like I mentioned earlier, like he played it. And I'm like, what do you got to say for yourself? Like, oh, it's not been tampered with. Well, it's missing this convenient section that shows that he conducted an illegal search, like in the van. Like it's just conveniently missing. Where's the other body camera from the other officer? Oh, we don't have it. That's conveniently missing. Okay. So
how convenient. It's always conveniently missing. Amazing.
Right. So we took a lunch break and we came back. And we got there early and we listened to the judge for a little bit for whatever case he had going on. The lights were already dimmed, so they dimmed the lights from the morning, so I didn't have to put my scarf around my eyes. And we got going. I want to say around 3:45, something like that. And he took about an hour. The judge took about an hour to try to cover his own ass, to try to don his cloak of absolute immunity. He called his own witnesses in his own defense. First was the bailiff. He wanted to try to explain why he kicked out a guy that was encouraging. This is the language in the ADA. It's 42 U.S.C. 12203. He was encouraging a person with disability in receiving equal access to goods and services. Because what he said was, "Hang in there, Mike," in response to all the threats and shit in the morning. That's what he said. Literally, it's encouragement. Yeah.
And that's illegal?
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form, apparently. What?
Yeah. The thing that's illegal is to threaten, coerce, intimidate, or interfere with either the person with a disability with receiving equal access to goods and services, or any person that's encouraging or assisting a person with disability in receiving equal access to goods or services. That's 42 U.S.C. 12203. So my auxiliary aide, that's that guy. He's protected from being coerced and intimidated. Well, supposed to be. The judge doesn't give a fuck about the federal laws because he threatened and coerced him into reading that document and trying to act as my visual interpreter. My friend who was my assistive or my auxiliary aide in a previous visit to court was in the audience. He said, "Hang in there, Mike." He was encouraging me with receiving equal access to goods and services. Because of that encouragement, he was threatened, coerced, and intimidated and interfered with. So the judge kept stepping on his dick and kept breaking the ADA left and right. And so for about an hour, he goes on and he calls the bailiff and swears the bailiff in to try to explain why he did what he did. And saying, oh, we had threats and stuff in this case a few years ago, when he was in the district court, even though this is hearsay because he didn't answer the calls. He doesn't know who it was. He said it was from places all over the world, right? And then the judge goes, well, prosecutor, did the defendant review the video? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, well, judge, I didn't, because you didn't provide a visual interpreter. And he's like, well, you had your aide there that's supposed to be acting as a visual interpreter. Like, no, he's not. Like he's not as my visual interpreter. You don't understand this. Like just fundamental not understanding of the ADA. Doesn't give a fuck. Like you have not given me access to these videos at all. I have never been given access to these videos at all. And he goes, okay, well, we're going to get to that. Previous to this date, in the district court, these videos were played, right? Like, yeah. It's like, all right. And he had an attorney, right? Like, yeah. I'm like, okay, but you did not provide a visual interpreter for the district court trial. So I never had access to these videos. And then he's like, well, who's the prosecutor in that? And the prosecutor goes, oh, that was Mr. Hugs. And he happens to be sitting right here. So Mr. Hugs magically manifests into the courtroom. So the judge can then, question him about testifying about what video access I've had.
Right.
And then he goes, okay, well, did he have access to these videos before district court? And he's like, yeah, at the police department. It's like, oh, is there anybody here that can testify to that? And the chief of police magically appeared on a random Monday afternoon in the courtroom.
Oh, he just happened to be there. Sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. She's like, oh, great. Yeah. Jason White, Madison Police Department, chief of police. Yeah. Tell us what happened. Like, how did he have access? Like, oh yeah, he asked to review him in public records law. He came in with his attorney in the summer and reviewed, these videos only from 2 officers, even though so they're claiming that 3 officers were there. And when the records show that the 3rd officer wasn't there, the CAD report shows he was canceled from the call. Right? They've never said that they had a body cam or dash cam from that supposed 3rd officer. And that 3rd officer is Clayton Doss, who was the guy who went around soliciting ban notices from the Madison businesses and got his local business owner buddies to ban me from 10 different businesses when I had set foot in 7 out of those 10.
Yep.
One of them being his own business that he was opening and it was yet to open, and it already banned me before he opened his own wine store business.
Wow.
Yeah, you just can't make this shit up, man. So
seriously,
anyway,
like you can't.
Yeah. So, so the chief of police is like, yeah, we played this guy's body cam and this guy's videos. And so I go, well, because I asked him some questions too, like, well, did you guys provide a visual interpreter? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, did you guys deny me my ability to take my own notes during that? He's like, yeah, you can use your recording devices. Okay, great. So I've never had access to these videos. Like, I don't know why we're going through the dog and pony show, Judge. Like, you're trying to defend yourself. You're trying to make a record for your own defense for when I sue you. This is what's going on. Like clearly this is all for your benefit, but really you're just stepping on your dick because this is all improper. This is all ADA related and it's administrative. So it's not to be handled from the bench. Like, you just keep fucking up, right? So he goes on and he reads my whole ADA request line for line, item for item, and says why he granted and why he denied things. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? He's doing it for the record. He's doing it so that it's on the record, just so that he can try to claim judicial immunity. Well, judges only are granted judicial immunity if they're acting in a judicial capacity. And so the courts have said it's judicial capacity if it's something only a judge can do. That means adjudication of a case. We haven't even gotten to the adjudication of the case. This is all administrative bullshit that he's doing from the bench. So he is abusing his power in his position. Anybody at any business, whether it be government or private, can accept and approve an ADA request. When you walk into the grocery store, when you walk into Walmart, the greeter can approve an ADA request. I did it the other day, literally at Walmart, Walmart greeter, because I went in, tried to get like a jar of jam or something, and they're like, "Hey, welcome to Walmart. Can I help you find something?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just trying to find a jar of jam. Like if you just tell me how many aisles up I need to go, I should be able to find it." Generally familiar with the thing. I have my app I can use And they're like, oh yeah, I can actually do it. I can help you out. Let me help you out with that. And so they had somebody cover their post, and they made the accommodation. Anybody, you can make the ADA request to anybody in any business, and they can approve it. To deny it, it's a different thing. To deny it, it has to go through a department head. It has to be in writing, and they have to demonstrate how granting the request would be either A, an undue burden, like I mentioned earlier, like tens of thousands of dollars, or B, a fundamental change to the business or service.
Mhm.
So, but it's administrative. It's not judicial. But this judge doesn't get that. He thought he was being clever by trying to put all this stuff in the record, and really he just dug his hole deeper. Right? He put it in the record that we can use against him in the federal lawsuit where we're going to sue his ass. And so that's Albright is the name of that judge. And eventually, once he got through all that dog and pony show, theatrics to use his word, right? It was nearly 5 p.m. before he started the adjudication of the case. He said, okay, let's get to these motions. Near 5 p.m. when we went in there at like 9 or 9:30, just a.m. because he took all this time to try to cover his tail. So then we get to the motions, and the first one that I wanted to argue was the motion to dismiss based on lack of due process, because I'm there standing in court all this time doing this stuff with court without visual interpretation services, without access to the visual information. He didn't order the prosecutor wear a blindfold. The prosecutor can take his own notes during this whole thing. The prosecutor's taking notes. I can't take notes. Right? I went on and added the different things from that day. Like you threatened me. 42 USC 12203. You threatened me to take out my blindfold. You threatened my aide. Same thing. 42 USC 12203. You coerced him into acting as a visual interpreter. 28 CFR 35.160 subsection C. Like you keep violating it. And the crazy thing is, it was a written motion to dismiss that he had, and he's named in that written motion to dismiss. Judge Albright is named as one of the chief violators of my rights. And did he recuse himself?
Nope.
No, he didn't.
Fucking amazing.
He sat there and let me accuse him as being the chief violator of my rights to due process. And the prosecutor didn't say shit. The prosecutor didn't argue that motion at all. There was no argument from the prosecution in my motion to dismiss. There was argument from the judge. The judge argued it in his own defense. The judge was questioning my auxiliary aid in the judge's own defense.
Well, why wouldn't then why wouldn't the prosecutor just dismiss if he wasn't going to challenge the motion to dismiss? I don't understand.
Yeah. So the prosecutor is supposed to he's supposed to be given an opportunity to be heard, and he can argue if he wants to argue against it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he made no argument. And so then the judge is supposed to weigh it, and in criminal matters, he's supposed to weigh in favor of the state. Let me correct that. He's supposed to be unbiased, but he's supposed to weigh any evidence and arguments in the light most favorable to the state. This terminology is. But if the prosecution offers no evidence or argument, then you can't weigh nothing, right? Zero gets a zero weight. You can try to attribute zero a heavier weight as much as you want. It's still going to be zero, right?
Yeah.
So there was no counter argument from the prosecution, and I cited Tennessee v. Lane as the Supreme Court case. I cited the ADA and the subparts, like I've been doing tonight, and I did some of the citations from the state law and GS 168A, and showed like, hey man, this is all these things, like it's well established. It's statutory law and case law, and you're in violation right now as we speak. And he's like, okay, well I'm going to deny your motion. And so we moved on to like motions to sequester. I think he granted motion. And he's like, are there any other motions? I'm like, yeah, there's this motion to continue that the prosecutor made. Because we're going to argue this. And he's like, oh no, this is already too late for that. We're not going to deal with this, right? Prosecutor's like, yeah, no, it's okay. Like, because he's there sick with COVID. It's too late.
Wait.
So
you got him there. What? Okay.
Yeah. So then he goes to this last motion is the motion to suppress. And he's like, this is a substantial motion, and this is going to take evidence So we can come back tomorrow morning at 9:30 to be prepared for having evidence and witnesses and things like that to hear that motion. And then we'll do jury selection on Wednesday. I'm like, okay. So that was it. He said, like he had granted as far as the ADA accommodation, he was granting the audio recording from the court reporter that I could use. And I had told him, like, that's not, I mean, I'll accept that, but I'm not accepting that in lieu of my notes. Like, unless you're going to order the prosecutor to not take notes, to wait till the end of the day and get his notes from the court reporter. And he didn't do that. He's like, no, I'm not going to make this equal. No. The prosecutor can take all the notes he wants. You have, on the other hand, have to wait till the end of the day and get your recording from the court reporter. So we had to wait for a while for her to get her stuff burned to a disk, and then we left. And my auxiliary aide, you know, he took me back to where we were lodging, and then he finished driving the other hour back to his place, and then he tested himself because he was feeling like shit, and he's like, hey, guess what? He tested positive. So he wasn't gonna be able to make it because he was, you know, sick as a dog. And so then I was out my auxiliary aid and my transportation, so I had to figure that out last minute. Made it there the next morning on Tuesday the 25th, and told the security guard, you know, answered his questions. Like, he's like, have you been around anyone that's tested positive? Like, yeah, 2 people. The prosecutor yesterday, who's probably still in the courtroom right now, and subsequent to that, my friend that was with me all day. Like, so
Right,
he's like, okay, we need to wait
exposed.
outside.
Sure.
Yeah. He's like, you need to wait outside. I'm like, okay, well, like, you guys have been exposed because like these guys have been through here. Like, you know, like these same security people have been exposed. Like, everybody in the courtroom yesterday was exposed because of the prosecutor. And he's probably still in the courtroom, like, still in the courthouse. And so this is before 9 a.m. But I was anticipating this, so I already had an email drafted with the attachment of his test result, his positive test result. And so before 9 a.m., you know, I stepped outside, sent off that email to the prosecutor and to the trial court coordinator, which is the contact person for the judge. But it was 40-degree weather. You know, snow was on the ground, and I wasn't dressed for standing outside in the snow. I was dressed for going inside in a courtroom.
Right.
Yeah. So they had me wait outside for over 2 hours, and they kept relaying. You know, the judge kept sending out his dog, his bailiff, to come ask me different things, like if I was going to take a rapid test, or if I would answer any of my vaccination status. And I'm like, no and no, because this private medical information, and I'm not going to let you guys do any kind of medical examination on me. No. Like, I don't have to either. Like, your own guidelines, your county guidelines on this thing is, if you've been exposed, you wait 5 days. Like, doesn't matter if your vaccination status says you wait 5 days. Like, so I don't, you know, if I take a test, it doesn't matter if it's going to show negative or positive. Like, your guidelines say I'm supposed to wait 5 days and then take a test. Like, so that's your own fucking guidelines, you know? It's not my guidelines. Eventually they come back out, and they tell me that they said the judge said, since you're not cooperating with the court, we're going to continue this to another date.
Since you're not cooperating, fuck.
Yeah. Well, when they came back, because they came out a second time, and the second time they had 2 people, and these are both guys that kidnapped me, by the way, on the same location at the courthouse step. And the first time it was one guy by himself, and then the second time he brought his buddy, and you know, I was recording it, and then they asked if they could talk to my auxiliary aide to confirm. I'm like, well, I can show you the picture of his result. Like, I emailed it in. Like, I can show you the result right here. Do you want to see it? And they go, no. I'm like, okay. What do you want to talk to him for? Like, oh, we just want some information from him. I'm like, well, I can call him, but I'm not at liberty to give you his information. So I stopped recording because I couldn't have any of my other devices that recorded. So I stopped recording with my phone and called him on speakerphone. Like, hey man, here's the situation. If you want to give your information, it's up to you. But, you know, you're not obligated to do anything. And he's like, I don't give a shit. So he gave his everything. He gave his name and his address and his phone number and everything to these guys. So I don't know what they mean by not cooperating with the court. Like, you know, I'm not going to give up my rights so that you can have access to my private medical information and perform medical exams on me. Like, if that's what you mean by not cooperating with the court, that follows suit with what the prosecutor said, back in 2020, when I said, I'm not waiving my rights. And she goes, oh, that's not how we do things here. Like, yeah, okay. So, it's been pending since there. I asked later that day, I think, or the next day, I asked for the copy of the audio from inside the courtroom while I was standing outside in the snow. Like, hey, this was part of the accommodation that was made for me to have all the audio from this case for the court. And they didn't respond. There was zero response. So then a few days later, maybe a week later, I followed up with another email like, hey, I want this audio. And I like CC their disability coordinators and stuff like, hey, this was made as an accommodation. I want this.
Right.
And then they were talking back and forth, and they said, oh, there's no audio. It doesn't exist. Nothing happened in court. And so I took it up to the state level. I'm like, no, that's bullshit. Like, they didn't have me sitting outside for 2 hours and didn't have anything going on inside the courtroom. I don't believe it. And so then the disability access coordinator at the state level said, we talked to them and they said there's no audio. I'm like, well, that's bullshit. Like, you need to do a better job. Like, no. The judge issued a written order on the 27th, so 2 days after this, denying, in part, like, part of it was him saying that he denied my motion to dismiss. Part of it, like the bulk of it, was him putting my ADA request in an order, again, violating the ADA because it's administrative, him trying to don judicial immunity, and going through all these different things. And then he revokes, in this order, he revokes the accommodation of providing the audio from the court reporter. This is dated on the 27th. And the 25th was the Tuesday when I was outside and they were inside. So his order wasn't in effect when they were inside doing shit in the courtroom. And just a few days ago, I don't think Nolan knew this, but just a few days ago, we got an email from the state disability access coordinator with, guess what? Audio files of the 25th.
So they had them the whole time and they were absolutely just either lying to you, holding it out, and then finally they got the state to, somebody at the state did find them and get them over to you.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So I appealed his order. I hadn't heard anything from the prosecutor about scheduling it for trial. So I appealed his order that denied my motion to dismiss. And so that means that goes to the North Carolina Court of Appeals. And that the appellate process is lengthy. And so currently we're waiting on a prosecutor to review the proposed record that I sent him. And he has a chance, he has 30 days to essentially object to it and say, he wants to change something or not change something. And then once I get that communication from him, then I have to file the record with the Court of Appeals. But until I do that, the jurisdiction still is with the Superior Court. So it doesn't shift to the Court of Appeals until I make that filing with the Court of Appeals. So I had reached out and said, hey, I'm still invoking my right to speedy trial. This has been going on for over 2 years. He's like, well, I'm not going to do anything. We don't have jurisdiction. I'm like, no, that's not how the appellate process works. You do have jurisdiction. It doesn't shift until I file this with the Court of Appeals. This is the prosecutor, not knowing how the fucking rules of appellate procedure work. And so then I filed a few other different things. So we have this pretrial motion to suppress, and then I filed another pretrial motion to dismiss based on different rights violations, like the Fourth and Eighth Amendment, the things from the excessive bond and cruel and unusual punishment. And so like those can be scheduled for court and heard. And I emailed him, I was like, hey man, we need to schedule these so that we can hear these. And he gave me the same thing. Oh, well, no, we don't want to do anything with this appeal pending. And I'm like, well, again, you have jurisdiction. The jurisdiction has not shifted. And these are pre-trial motions. So it's not like it's advancing the case at all to trial. These can be heard, and both of them, either of them, if either of them is granted, the case is dead. The case is over with. It's done with. If a judge grants the motion to suppress the case, you have no evidence that you can bring to try to try me on anything. It's over with. If he grants the motion to dismiss, it gets thrown out. It's dismissed.
Right.
and then my appeal automatically gets withdrawn because I'm not appealing something that's dismissed. Like that saves everybody time and money. And it's called, the term is judicial economy. So it's like I told him, in the interest of judicial economy, let's schedule these pretrial hearings and adjudicate these motions. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. So he's not doing it because it's punitive, because he knows every day that goes by, it costs our family $10 in interest for that $50,000 loan.
And at some point you'll get that $50,000 loan back for the bond, but you won't get that back until this is all adjudicated and resolved.
Right. So if he could schedule this for next week, he could schedule a pretrial hearing to hear the motion to dismiss and then the motion to suppress.
And can you sue the judge? Can you sue the county for violating your right to due process? Is that something that you're already in the process of doing?
So I keep bringing up this concept of absolute judicial immunity, and it's fucking horrendous.
Beyond.
You've heard of qualified immunity. You've heard of qualified immunity, right? That's
sure.
It's
for cops.
Elected officials. It's elected officials and cops. Yeah, they have qualified immunity. Well, judges and their ilk, so the prosecutor and the judge's staff, they have something beyond qualified immunity, and it's called absolute immunity, which means that they are immune from being sued personally for any of the things that they do that are a violation of people's rights, unless there's a caveat, unless they're doing something that's not judicial in nature. If they're doing something that's administrative, right? ADA, like I keep saying, ADA issues are administrative and not judicial. So you can sue judges and their ilk for violations of the ADA, and we are in the process of doing that. But yeah, so any errors that they make from the bench, where they, like for instance, in the district court trials, right, where they just rubber stamp guilty when there was no evidence presented, right? when they testified there was no crime, you know, like the judge that clearly was acting punitively, right? The judge putting in these excessive bonds and stuff as a punitive measure, put me on house arrest as a punitive measure. You know, those punishing me greater than he could sentence me, greater than he did sentence me, and his punishment for appealing him was far greater than the sentence that he imposed. Right? Those things I can't sue him for, because those are judicial. He's free from lawsuit for doing those things.
But if he's violating administrative process, that's where you can potentially hold him liable.
Yeah, the ADA violations, absolutely.
And what are the consequences? I mean, does he get fined? Does he lose his judgeship? I mean, what happens to them if
it just depends on what I ask for in the claim, right? I can ask for that in the claim. I can ask that he be disbarred. I can ask that he be removed from the bench. I can ask for monetary damages that he pays directly, like not that the state covers, but that the county covers, but that he has to cover.
Wow.
Right. But the state of North Carolina is listed as the primary defendant in the ADA suit.
God, there's so much to this case, and that's part of what they want, is for there to be so many facets and for there to be so many situations that it's hard for people to even keep up with it. And as they wash through new people, people change jobs all the time. You got new clerks. Everybody needs to educate themselves to this entire case and to the nuances and to the little things that have happened. And half of that disappears over time. It drains out. And
yeah,
it's frustrating and sad. And again, I appreciate you spending the time of going through it on our channel for everyone who's watching, so that it's recorded for anyone that wants to watch it later on. We're going to be sharing this again out to a ton of different platforms, and we're certainly going to stay on this. But yeah, anything else you want to keep going? I'm certainly open to it. I'm fascinated.
I think you're up to date. I think you're up to date. We're waiting on a response for the motion to suppress. From the last video in the Guilford County series, we're waiting on the judge's order on that, and we're waiting on for this last one I was talking about with Rockingham County, we're waiting on either the prosecutor to schedule the pretrial motion so that we can get rid of this case with the motion to dismiss or motion to suppress, or waiting for him to respond and say, okay, this record's good, or let's add this to the record, or he objects to it, and I file that with the Court of Appeals, and that takes months and months. Like that, the Court of Appeals process takes months and months and months before we hear a response from them, and they either agree with me and say, yeah, your rights are violated under the ADA, which is the due process. Like the ADA, Title II of the ADA violations, according to the Supreme Court in Tennessee v. Lane from 2004, they said it also violates the 14th Amendment, your due process rights, protected by the 14th Amendment. So
Wow.
if the Court of Appeals agrees with me, then they will grant the motion to dismiss and that case goes away. If they don't agree with me, then they kick it back down to the Superior Court, and we are still in the same position. And then he has to schedule the pretrial motion to dismiss and motion to suppress, and we're back to dealing with the courts. But at least we can say, hey, we've established this precedent of level of accommodation in Guilford County that you can do all this stuff remotely via WebEx. I can have all my accommodations in place, and you guys can have a visual interpreter. And that's better than what we were before, where he said, no, fuck that, you can only come in with nothing, and then it was half of nothing, or half of what I asked for, and then it was 2/3 of what I asked for, and then threats and coercion and intimidation. So that we're not going to play that game again. They're going to give me the same level that I've got in Guilford County, but now Guilford County is screwing up again, because this past week I've been trying to file motions, sending them mail electronically, and they say, oh, we can't file electronically. And I'm like, okay, I'm not asking you to file these things electronically. I'm asking you to receive mail electronically. My request under the ADA is for you to modify your mailing policy. I can't physically mail you physical printed material because I can't read the physical printed material to make sure I'm mailing you the motion that I want to be mailing.
Right?
Yeah,
I can't read it.
You should mail him some porn.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't know what I printed
How
out.
would you
I don't
know what it was?
whether
Right. Sure.
Yeah, I don't know whether I printed out a bunch of dick pics or what, like I don't know. So
Well,
but they literally said, oh, well, you just mail it to us, and then we will file it and scan it and then send it back to you. I'm like, that's too late. Like if I sent you a bunch of like pictures of my butthole, like it's too late to realize that, whoops, now it's in the court file, Not that I have pictures of my butthole, but
well, we don't know, do you? I mean, you can't see, right? I mean,
no, but this is how insane. Like this is what the clerk said. They said, oh, just mail it to us and then we'll file it and send it back to you, like electronically. Like, no, that doesn't make any sense. I need to know what I'm sending you to the court before I send it. It's ludicrous. And so the other option is you take it in person. Well, they won't let me in the courthouse in person. That's where all this mess started. And so then the other option is I hand it to somebody else and they do it. Well, now we have that same problem, 28 CFR 35.160 subsection C, that you can't force a person with a disability to use another person as their interpreter.
right.
So either way, whether I send it in the mail or I have a person walk it in, I'm using another person as my interpreter, and I cannot be forced to do that. So they have to make a modification. And I'm not asking them to file it electronically. I'm not asking them to build an electronic filing system so that I can submit it via an online filing system. Even though they have those in the works, they are rolling them out in North Carolina in the courts. And they do actually do electronic filing in this court, but they only do it in specific circumstances that they say I don't qualify for, which is just bullshit. I said, you know what? I'm not even going to ask you to electronically file it. I'm just asking you to modify your mailing policy to allow me, a visually impaired person, to mail you things electronically. You then take that electronic mail, commonly known as email, and you print it, and then you file it normally. Like, I'm not asking you to file it electronically. I'm asking you to just receive my mail electronically, print it, and file it normally.
Put it in the file, right? No, we don't want to do that. No, we don't do that.
No. So again, to deny it, they are required to have a department head put it in writing how it'd be either an undue burden, which means costing them tens of thousands of dollars. That's clearly not the case, right? or proving how it'd be a fundamental difference to the goods or services that they provide. Well, fundamentally, either one of you can answer this. Fundamentally, what is the job of the clerk of court?
To process whatever documentation and paperwork they're ordered to by the judge, I would think.
Yeah, so partly right. So fundamentally, their job is to receive documents from people and file those documents for the court, and vice versa, like filing document from the judge, like from orders from the judge or from the prosecution, right? And then to make those documents available to the public and to litigants. Like it's literally, they are an in-between. They are to file documents and then hand documents back out to different parties. That's it. Fundamentally, that is their job. So what is a fundamental difference in what I'm asking for?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Fundamentally, I'm asking them the same thing. Like I'm just, the method is different. The method is a different method of mail. But fundamentally, you are receiving a document, you are taking it, or filing it.
That's all it is. Equal fucking access.
Yeah, fundamentally, there's nothing different. It's fundamentally exactly the fucking same. But this is where we are. And this is the courthouse where they granted all my other accommodations, including a visual interpreter. Like, and now we're back to this, where this clerk, one little junior clerk or second in command clerk, Leslie Arthur, is trying to say, there's a policy that I have to follow. I'm like, okay, that's not. And so I sent them, again, the subparts of the ADA. But you citing a policy to me is not the same as you demonstrating how it's a fundamental difference. Like fundamentally, it's the same. You can't. And furthermore, the Superior Court in Rockingham, as backwards as they are, they have been letting me send them my documents electronically, and they've been filing them no problem. So like they won't let me in the courts and do courts via all these other accommodations, but the clerk's office is at least accessible to me, but it's backwards and the other count. Like it's, yeah. So that's where we're at. You're caught up to date. Like it's a fucking shit show. If you want to talk anymore or ask any questions, like go for it.
Man, I got to tell you, I'm a little spent for tonight, but I definitely want to continue this. We're gonna have you back, and we'll do this again, and we'll code stream this out to a ton of different channels as the case gets updated. I really appreciate you spending all this time tonight and going through this with me and with us who are watching. We're with you. We support you 100%. Please share this out to everybody, everyone that's watching. Please, again, like, share, subscribe to Blind Justice. Again, you can support with the PayPal if you can. Noli's linked the Google Drive documents, and I believe they're also in all the descriptions in every channel that we have. So please follow this story, share this with everybody you know, and talk about what's going on and the fact that there is this judicial immunity, and start having conversations like this and direct them towards Mike's videos and Mike's channel and this video and have it explained. I know it takes a while to get through, but it's so important because our rights are being violated. Mike's rights are being violated. And if it can happen to Mike, who's a veteran, who's a disabled veteran, I mean, it's disgraceful. It really is. Fought for our country and being treated like this. And again, I feel for you. And when Noli brought this, we covered the case when Noli co-hosted How Did We Miss That? And she said you'd be open to talking. Yes, absolutely. Anything I can do to shed light on this and to help you with with your case and with the situation, we're definitely behind you. And I'll give you and Noli a chance to say anything, and then I'm gonna say thank the patrons, and we'll cut out for tonight. But again, thanks again, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Noli, you got anything you plug?
Yeah, a little bit. One, don't forget to go and vote for my painting, you guys. Go do it. Go do it now. I'm 5th, and there's 4 days left. 4 days.
5th? Wait, we're dropping? What happened?
Grant could help a lot of people, don't you think?
$25,000 goes a long way.
But no, I think I would ask people to definitely discuss this case with their friends and family at home. Take them to Mike's channel and show them who Mike is, because if you don't like him, you're a fucking dick.
Hmm.
It's just how I see it. You're a
Pretty
dick if
much.
you don't like him. But what was it I was gonna say? Jury duty. So if you guys happen to be on jury duty at any given time, which we all get called for it eventually, if we're on the county records, there is what the hell is it called? I can't even think of it now. I'm losing my voice. It's gone.
Nullification?
Yes, thank you. Jury nullification. Please look that up. Print up flyers, hand them out to the people drop them in random mailboxes. Because people need to know about this shit, and it can be risky to tell people about it. Even within your own home, they will find a way to arrest you for it. But it is perfectly legal to discuss it and to share the information with people. People need to understand that just because there's a law that's been broken doesn't mean that the punishment is fair.
Yeah.
And we need to start protecting people a little bit fucking better. And by serving on jury duty and knowing about jury nullification is a way to do that. And I think that
Is that what happened to
more
Steve
people
Donziger?
would be, huh?
Is that what they did to Steve Donziger? The jury nullification, where they basically appointed a private judge to prosecute his case, or is this something different?
No, that private judging though. Oh my God, I got somebody for you to fucking interview. Let me tell you
All
what.
right, well, we can definitely talk about that for sure. Yeah.
But no, so jury nullification, what it is so a jury
You want me
is called
to do it, Millie?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Please.
You get at it.
All right. So the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, it's something like the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution,
Mhm.
nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively. And then this is the last little 4 words that everybody misses. It says, or to the people, or to the people, right? So jury nullification is the checks and balances in place that the people have, right?
Mhm.
So the legislators supposedly make the laws. The judiciary is supposed to interpret the laws. The executive branch enforces the laws. And there's supposed to be checks and balances there. Well, the people have checks and balances, not just through the voting system, which is all fucked up, but with the juries, because the juries are made out of the people.
Yep.
And so if there's a law that you think should not be a law, you think that cannabis should be legal and not criminalized, right? You think that anything else that somebody's charged with should be legal and not criminalized, then it doesn't matter if the prosecution says, hey, we got this guy dead to rights. We can show that he did X, Y, and Z. Here's all the evidence, right? That doesn't matter, because the jury, even seeing all the evidence that would supposedly render a guilty verdict under that law, if the law is shit and the people don't want it, the jury can nullify the law by voting to deliberate and say, we're going to find this person not guilty. We're going to give them a not guilty verdict, and thereby nullifies that law. It's the last checks and balance that we have is on the jury using jury nullification. Now that it's a double-edged sword, because it can work the other way, and I'd say it works the other way more often than not.
Sure.
And that means that, like in my case, where the evidence, like the prosecution has zero evidence in either of my cases, right? But he's going to get up and he's going to try to convince the jury that I'm a bad guy, that all these different things, right? And try to appeal to their bootlicking tendencies and say, we need to convict this guy. And so even though they have the highest standard, the highest burden of proof, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest burden of proof in the judicial system. Like, they get convictions regularly from juries when they don't meet their burden, because they appeal to the juries, just do what we say. This judge has jury instructions, and you guys need to do what the judge says because you're dumb. And they go, okay, yeah, well, the judge says so, and these jury instructions, so let's just do what the judge and the prosecutor want. And they find people guilty when the prosecutor didn't present the evidence for a guilty verdict. Right? So it works usually against the people, because people don't know this exists, because people don't know the Constitution. They don't know their rights. They don't know, they're not told that they actually have the power to nullify, the
Laws,
corruption of
yeah.
the judge and the prosecution and the legislators, right? And the laws. Yeah. So that's jury nullification in a nutshell.
Wow. Amazing. Again, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Noli. I'm gonna cut out for tonight, but I'm gonna go back to our one shot, and I will take everybody out and say thank you again tonight for everyone. Let's see if this is the right button to mute you guys. Yes, good. Okay, so again, thank you so much, everyone, who was here tonight. Thank you to Noli for introducing us to Mike. Thank you to Mike for serving, for going through all of this, for educating us as to what's happening and how our system can absolutely just beat down someone even though they've served, even though they're disabled. It's really sad. Again, we're hoping that things are going to work out for Mike, and that the judge and everyone who sees this will be aware, and he'll get some relief here. Again, just wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to our patrons. We do have a few patrons in our Patreon, and that's Rich M and Richard and Les Bones and Radical Leftist Agenda, Nikki and Eric T. Red. Thank you so much for all your support. Say thank you to the volunteers that help us share this out, to Nicole and Darlene and Big Mad Crab. Shout out to Jimmy Saves World, Jimmy Sunderland for the thumbnail for tonight's stream. Shout out, of course, to Alex Davidson for liking every Substack post every week that we put out. Again, thank you so much. And our new Rockfin channel. Wanted to tell everyone again to subscribe to our new Rockfin channel, rockfin.com/INDLeftNews. It's commercial free. You can subscribe for free. You can follow the channel for free. Premium content on the entire platform is $9.99 per month. If you want to subscribe, it's not required. I don't even think you need an email address anymore to watch the videos, which is great. We do put premium content for clips up for 24 hours, and then we make them available to everyone. But we want to give some premium content to subscribers of the platform. But again, thank you so much tonight to Mike. Thank you so much to Noli. Thank you so much to everybody for being here. We're going to be live tomorrow night at 10 o'clock for How Did We Miss That, our regular Sunday night show. Please definitely be here for that. We're going to have a special guest co-host. Reese going to take the week off, and we're going to have Stephanie Smith come in. She's one of the INN contributors. She helps share some links all the time out to Facebook for us. Been on Tommy Nation. She was on our INN family live stream back in December. So I'm excited to have her come in and co-host with me tomorrow night. Wow, it's been a busy week. We were on Misty's show this past Tuesday. That's up on our YouTube channel. We had a member live stream for Indie News Network. That's also on our YouTube channel on Wednesday. Thursday, I was on with Kit for Hardlens Media on their exclusive Rockfin show. So if you're a Rockfin premium member, go to rockfin.com/hardlensmedia, and you'll be able to listen to my interview with Kit and talk about censorship, talking about platforms, talking about what's going on in the lefty independent space. And finally, then last night I was on Reefer After Dark with Reef and with Jesse Jett, and that was a goofy good time, and we just kind of cut loose and watched some cringe videos and talked about cannabis. So again, lots of fun happening, lots of things happening on Indie News Network, lots of things happening on IndependentLeft.news. Go to leftist.today, that's our Substack. Subscribe, share, follow. And of course, IndependentLeft.media. That's the links to find everything in the Independent Left news. That's IndependentLeft.media. Again, thank you so much. Happy Fuck the Cops Day, as Noli likes to say. FTP, ACAB. And everybody, thank you again so much. We are going to be out for tonight. Have a great